winter nights when the world wraps itself in holiday lights and cheer, some people remember Christmas for something far darker. They recall the creak of a door opening in an empty house, lights flickering on their own, and that chilling sense the home was suddenly watching them. These aren't campfire tales or urban legends. These are true accounts whispered by survivors who still double-check their locks every December. Tonight, we're sharing 11 bone-chilling real Christmas horror stories that will shake you to your core. Cinematic retellings of events exactly as they happened, guaranteed to ruin holiday nights forever. You're not just hearing stories, you're stepping into the nightmare. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, and subscribe to our channel for more horror stories. Story 1. My name is David Reeves, and this is the story I've never told anyone completely. Not my wife, not the therapist I saw for 3 years, not even my sister who asked directly. But I'm telling it now because I'm 58 years old, and I'm tired of carrying it alone. This happened on Christmas Eve, 1995, in a small town called Silvermore, Colorado, where my family had rented a house for the holidays. I was 23, home from college, and I was supposed to be babysitting my younger siblings while my parents went to the church Christmas Eve service. They were only supposed to be gone for 2 hours. The house we'd rented was built in the 1970s, a sprawling ranch on 5 acres just outside town. My parents had found it through a property management company. They wanted something cozy and private for the holidays, away from the city. The place was isolated, sitting at the end of a long driveway with nothing but woods and open land around it. In the summer, I'm sure it would have been beautiful. In December, with snow starting to fall, it felt like the edge of the world. My parents left around 7:30 p.m. on December 24th. My mother reminded me that my youngest brother, Tommy, was 7 and still believed in Santa. My father said they'd be back by 9:30 at the latest. My middle sister, Rebecca, was 16 and claimed she was too old to need a babysitter, but she said she'd help watch Tommy anyway. That was the last normal conversation I had with any of my family. "Lock the doors," my mother said as she was leaving. "Don't answer if anyone knocks. We have our keys." I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say. Silvermore wasn't a dangerous town. It was the kind of place where people still left their car doors unlocked. But I nodded and promised. The 3 of us, me, Rebecca, and Tommy, settled in for the evening. Tommy was wired on sugar from the Christmas cookies my mother had left out. He kept running around the house, playing with his new Lego set, asking approximately 8,000 times if it was midnight yet. Rebecca rolled her eyes from the couch, pretending to read a magazine but actually watching MTV on the little TV in the living room with the volume low. I was in the kitchen drinking coffee and reading a Stephen King novel, IT, which in hindsight was a poor choice for that particular night, when I heard the knock on the front door. It was somewhere around 8:15 p.m. "I'll get it," Rebecca called out before I could even put the book down. "Wait," I said, remembering my mother's instruction. I got up and came out to the living room. I said, "No one answers. It's probably the neighbors or something," Rebecca said, already on her way to the door. But when she looked through the peephole, she stopped. "What?" I asked. "There's a man," she said quietly. "I don't recognize him." Through the glass panel beside the door, I could see a figure on the porch. He was tall, wearing a dark coat and a hat. His face was turned slightly away from the window, so I couldn't see it clearly. "Can I help you?" I called out through the door, not opening it. "My car broke down about a quarter mile up the road," he said. His voice was calm, almost polite. "I saw your lights. I was wondering if I could use your phone to call a tow truck." It was 1995. Cell phones existed, but they were expensive and bulky, and most people still didn't carry them regularly. A stranger asking to use the phone was not unusual, even now, but something about it felt wrong. "We don't have a phone," I lied. "There was a phone in the kitchen and another in my parents' bedroom." "Oh," he said. He paused. "Well, is there a house closer? I've been walking for a while." "The closest neighbor is a mile away," I said. "You should go back to your car and wait. Someone will come along. It's getting very cold," he said. And now there was something different in his voice. Something that made my skin prickle. "And I'm not sure my car is safe to wait in. The engine stalled out pretty badly. Call a tow truck from there," I said firmly. "I can't help you," Rebecca had backed away from the door and was looking at me with wide eyes. She was scared, I could tell. The man didn't move for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay, thank you anyway," and walked off the porch. I watched through the window as he headed back down the driveway, his figure becoming smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed him. "That was weird," Rebecca said. "Yeah," I agreed, but I was already moving toward the door to make sure it was locked. It was. I checked the back door too. Locked. I checked the windows, all secure. For the next hour, nothing else happened. Tommy fell asleep around 9 p.m., curled up on the couch with his Lego set scattered around him. Rebecca and I watched TV with the volume low, both of us hyper-aware of every creak and sound the old house made. By 9:45, my parents still weren't home, but I wasn't worried yet. Roads could be icy. Services could run late. It was 1:07 p.m. when the phone rang. The landline in the kitchen, a sharp, loud ring that made both Rebecca and me jump. "Get it," Rebecca said nervously. I went into the kitchen and picked up. "Hello?" Static. Just loud, white static on the other end. "Hello?" I said again. The static continued for a few more seconds, then cleared slightly. I could hear what sounded like wind, and underneath it, a voice. Not the man from the door. A woman. And she was saying something, but the static was too loud to hear her clearly. "I'm sorry, I can't hear you," I said. "Can you call back?" The line went dead. I hung up slowly, looking at the phone. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Who was it?" she asked. "I don't know. Bad connection." My parents didn't arrive home until 10:53 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the microwave clock, feeling a creeping anxiety that I couldn't quite justify. When I saw their car pull up the driveway, snow swirling in the headlights, I felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost physical. My father came in first, stamping snow off his boots. My mother followed, her cheeks red from the cold, her arms full of little gifts they'd picked up at the church gift exchange. "How were the kids?" my mother asked immediately. "Fine," I said. "Everything's fine," though someone came to the door. A man came by asking to use the phone. His car broke down. I didn't let him in, though. My parents exchanged a quick look. "What did he look like?" my father asked. "Tall, dark coat. I couldn't see his face clearly. He said his car died about a quarter mile up the road." My father walked to the window and looked out at the snowy driveway, then back at me. "We saw a car on the way back," he said. "Pulled over on the side of the road about 3/4 of a mile from here. No one was in it." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't told him exactly where the man had said the car was broken down, but he'd found it anyway. "There's more," I said, and told them about the strange phone call. My parents listened, and I could see my mother's expression tightening with each detail. "We should call the police," my mother said. "And tell them what?" My father replied, "That someone knocked on the door asking to use the phone, that a phone call had static on it," but he sounded uncertain. He walked over to the phone in the kitchen and picked it up, listening to the dial tone. Then he did something strange. He dialed the last number in the call log, the number that had called us just before they came home. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Someone picked up, but didn't speak. "Who is this?" my father said, his voice suddenly hard in a way I'd never heard before. The person on the other end breathed. I could hear it through the receiver from where I stood, and then the line went dead. My father didn't try again. Instead, he told me to go upstairs and go to bed, that everything was fine, that he was sure it was just some prank or a crossed line. But he locked every door in the house, and I heard him checking the windows. I heard him moving around downstairs for a long time after everyone was supposed to be in bed. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning was Christmas. Tommy woke up at 6, excited about presents. My mother seemed normal, making breakfast. My father was quieter than usual. Rebecca helped me carry presents downstairs, and we didn't discuss what had happened. But on the 26th, my father told us we were leaving. "The weather's clearing," he said, "and I have work to get back to. We'll cut the trip short." We packed up within hours. I remember my mother arguing quietly with my father about it. She wanted to stay the full week, but he was adamant. We left Silvermore that afternoon. It wasn't until years later that I learned the full story. I was in graduate school, Christmas break, sitting in my parents' living room. My mother had been drinking wine, and the conversation turned to old memories. I asked her somewhat casually about that Christmas in Colorado, about why we'd left so suddenly. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Your father got a call after you went to bed." "From who?" I asked. "The police," she said. There had been 3 break-ins in homes around Silvermore over the previous 2 weeks. All of them when families were away from home, even briefly. The last one was 2 days before we arrived, and the night of the 24th, the night we went to church, the police had received a call from a house about 5 miles away. A woman reported that someone had been in her home while she was sleeping. My stomach turned cold. She said she woke up because she felt someone watching her. My mother continued. By the time she screamed and her husband came in, the person was gone. But they left footprints in the dust on her dresser where they'd been standing, looking down at her. "Jesus," I whispered. "The police were calling all the properties in the area to warn people," my mother said, "to tell us to be vigilant. When your father mentioned that someone had come to our door earlier that evening, the officer said that matched the description of the person they were looking for, and that they suspected he'd been watching homes to see which ones had people home and which ones didn't." "But we were home," I said. "You were," my mother said. "That's the only reason he didn't come back." She took another sip of wine and added, quietly, "The police found a car abandoned on the road near the house the next day. It had been reported stolen from Denver 3 days earlier, but they never found the man. Not while we were there, and I don't know if they ever found him." I asked my father about it once, years later. He was more direct. There were 6 break-ins total over that winter, he told me, all around the same area, all with the same signature. He'd enter homes, go to bedrooms where people were sleeping, and just stand there, watching. One man woke up and chased him out. A woman called the police while he was still in her house and managed to get to her children's room. But most of the time, people didn't wake up until after he was gone. "Did they catch him?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "No," my father said. "He vanished. Last confirmed sighting was that abandoned car. After that, nothing. I've lived 58 years since that Christmas Eve. I've been to therapy. I've read books about trauma and intrusive thoughts. I've built a good life, a wife, 2 kids, a house with a security system that costs more than I wanted to spend. I've never had trouble sleeping exactly, but I have trouble with the dark. I keep lights on. I check locks obsessively. I have nightmares about footsteps on hardwood floors. But the worst part isn't the fear of what could have happened if my parents had been delayed another hour. Wasn't the fear of what that man might have done if I'd opened the door. The worst part is that I never knew his name. For 30 years, that man was just a figure in a dark coat, a voice asking to use, a phone, a presence that stood in other people's bedrooms watching them sleep. And I started to wonder, because this is what fear does. It corrupts your thinking. If there had ever been a car on the road at all, if he had simply come to our house, found us awake and aware, and moved on to easier prey. In 2001, almost 6 years after that Christmas, I was reading the newspaper and saw a small article in the back pages. A man had been arrested in Nebraska, identified finally after DNA evidence was developed in cold cases. He'd been convicted of breaking into homes in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska in the 1990s. 6 confirmed B&Es where he'd stood over sleeping people. 1 confirmed homicide, a woman who'd woken up and fought back. His name was Michael Graves. I looked up everything I could find about him. The articles were sparse, local news mostly, before internet databases were comprehensive. But I found enough to piece together that he'd been active during the exact time frame that matched the Silvermore break-ins. The description matched. The MO matched. I don't know for certain that he was the man who came to our door on Christmas Eve 1995, but I'm nearly sure of it. And what keeps me awake sometimes, even now, is the thought that if my parents had been delayed just a little longer, if the church service had run over, if they'd decided to grab coffee before coming home, what would have happened when he came back to our door? Would I have opened it, eventually, out of some misguided sense of Christian charity? Would he have found a way in? I'll never know. Michael Graves is dead now. He died in prison in 2014. I went to my therapist with this information, hoping it would bring closure. It didn't. It just meant that the shape of my fear had a name and a face, but the fear itself didn't go away. Every Christmas, I think about that night. I think about the static on the phone line and the voice underneath it that I could never quite make out. I think about the man in the dark coat standing on our porch, calm and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. I think about my little brother asleep on the couch, surrounded by his toys, completely oblivious to how close danger had come. And I think about those other people, the ones who woke up to find him standing there in the dark, watching. The ones who survived and lived with that image forever. The one who didn't. Christmas is supposed to be about family being safe and together. For me, it's always been about the year they almost weren't, about an hour of my life where things hung in the balance and came down really to chance and timing. My wife doesn't understand why I can't enjoy the holidays the way other people do. My therapist suggested I was being irrational, but I know something they don't. Sometimes the worst horror isn't what happens. It's what almost happens, and the knowledge that you were just lucky, that someone, somewhere, wasn't. That's the Christmas I can't forget. The one where my family came home, and I realized that it wasn't guaranteed they would. That in this world, sometimes monsters come knocking on doors, and the only thing standing between them and your loved ones is a lock and a young man's instinct not to let them in. I've spent 30 years being grateful for that instinct, and 30 years terrified that it wouldn't be enough if he came back. Story 2. My name is Rebecca Hartley, and I was 31 years old when this happened. It was December 1997, and I was spending Christmas alone in a small house I'd just bought in Asheville, North Carolina. The house was a 1,952 Craftsman, beautiful and old, with original hardwood floors and a wraparound porch. I'd closed on it in November after my divorce was finalized, and I was determined to make the holiday meaningful, to prove to myself and everyone else that being alone didn't mean being unhappy. My ex-husband had taken most of our furniture in the split, so the house was sparse, but I'd spent 2 weeks decorating it meticulously. A 7-foot Christmas tree in the living room, garland along the banister of the main staircase, lights strung around the porch, and ornaments, dozens of them, hung with care and intention. I'd always loved ornaments. They were the only decorations my mother had kept after my father died when I was 12. Each one had a story, a memory attached to it. I had my mother's ornaments, ornaments from trips I'd taken, ornaments I'd bought in antique shops just because they spoke to me. On December 23rd, I spent the entire day arranging them on the tree. It was meditative, almost ceremonial. Each ornament had a perfect spot, a vintage glass angel near the top, wooden animals from a craft fair I'd attended in 1994, a ceramic nativity set that had been my grandmother's, hung in a cluster near the middle branches. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. I made hot chocolate, sat on my new couch, one of the few pieces I'd kept from the marriage, and looked at my tree. The lights reflected off the ornaments, casting small colored shadows on the walls. I felt proud. I felt like I was building something new. That night, I went to bed around 11. The next morning, December 24th, I woke up early with a strange feeling. Not quite dread, but a sense of wrongness that I couldn't name. I lay in bed for a moment, listening to the house, trying to figure out what had triggered the feeling. Then I heard it. A soft, repeated tapping sound coming from downstairs. My heart rate spiked. I told myself it was the house settling, the wind, something normal. But the tapping continued, regular, deliberate, not random at all. It sounded like it was coming from the living room. I got out of bed slowly, put on my robe, and crept downstairs. The house was cold. My breath came out in small clouds. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the tapping stopped. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. The tree glowed softly in the early morning light, ornaments catching the illumination from the lights. Everything looked perfect, except one of the ornaments was on the floor. It was a delicate glass teardrop, pale blue, one I'd bought at an antique mall in Tennessee the year before. It hadn't broken. It lay intact on the hardwood floor directly beneath the tree. But it had been hanging about 6 feet up, on a sturdy branch. It shouldn't have fallen. I picked it up, examined it for damage. None. I looked up at the tree, trying to figure out where it had hung. The branch it should have been on was still there, still sturdy. I rehung the ornament carefully, making sure the hook was secure. Then I went back to bed, unsettled, but telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. Old hooks, the heat from the lights, the house settling. But I didn't sleep well. The next morning, December 2005, Christmas morning, I woke up with my stomach in knots. I lay in bed for a moment, building up the courage to go downstairs. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. I was right. 3 more ornaments had fallen during the night. Not broken, just fallen. A wooden soldier from a set I'd collected. A glass ball with tiny scenes painted inside it. A cloth angel, one of my favorites. This time I didn't try to rationalize it. I went straight to the phone and called my best friend, Marcus, who lived about 20 minutes away. "Something's wrong with my tree," I told him. "Ornaments keep falling off." "Becca, it's Christmas morning," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Trees shed ornaments. It happens. Not like this. Not all in one night. And the hooks are tight." I checked. There was a pause. Then he said, "Do you want me to come over?" I did, but I also didn't want to spend Christmas with someone else in my house, even Marcus. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to prove I could be alone and be fine. "No," I said. "It's fine. I'm being paranoid. I'll talk to you later." I hung up before he could argue. That day, I tried to have a normal Christmas. I opened the few presents I'd bought myself. A new sweater, a book, some bath salts. I made a nice dinner. I watched a movie. But I kept glancing toward the living room, toward the tree, waiting for the sound of something falling. It never came while I was awake. But the next morning, December 26th, 4 more ornaments were on the floor. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at them, my hands shaking. This wasn't normal. This wasn't wind or settling or loose hooks. Someone was in my house. Someone was taking my ornaments off the tree at night. I checked every door and window, all locked, no signs of forced entry. I called the police, but before the dispatcher could even ask clarifying questions, I realized how I sounded. "Someone's taking ornaments off my tree," I said weakly. There was a pause. "Ornaments," the dispatcher repeated. "Yes, but I think someone's in my house, taking them at night." "Have you seen anyone? Has anything else been disturbed?" "No, just the ornaments, but we can send someone by later today if you'd like to file a report," she said, her tone making it clear she thought I was wasting her time. "But if your house is secure and nothing else is missing, there may not be much we can do." I hung up. The police wouldn't help. No one would help. I was alone with whatever was happening in my house. That night, I did something desperate. I set up a camera, an old camcorder I'd kept from before the divorce, pointed at the tree. I put a blank VHS tape in it, turned it on, and went to bed with the bedroom door locked and a baseball bat beside my bed. I didn't sleep. I lay awake most of the night, listening to the house, waiting for sounds. Sometime around 3 a.m., I heard it, the soft, deliberate tapping sound. Not the same as before. This was slower, more intentional, and it was coming from inside the walls. I grabbed the baseball bat, turned on every light in the house, and ran downstairs. The living room was silent. The tree stood exactly as I'd left it. The camera was still recording. I stood there, bat raised, looking around. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But I could feel it, a presence in the house, close by, almost touching. Then, very slowly, one of the ornaments fell from the tree. Not the way ornaments fall when they slip from a branch. It fell straight down, like it had been dropped. A ceramic reindeer, one of a set my grandmother had given me. It hit the floor and shattered. I screamed. I screamed, and I grabbed my coat and my car keys and I ran out of that house. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the highway and sat in a booth. Until dawn, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold a coffee cup. When the sun came up, I drove directly to Marcus's house. I showed him the camcorder footage. We watched it together, sitting in his living room. The tape showed my living room, dark except for the tree lights, perfectly still. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then, at the 2:47 a.m. mark, an ornament moved. Not fell, moved. On the screen, you could see a glass ball, one of the ones that had ended up on the floor, shift on its branch. Slowly, like someone was gently, deliberately pushing it until the hook came loose. It tumbled to the floor. 3 minutes later, another ornament did the same thing. Marcus and I watched the entire tape. 7 ornaments fell while the camera recorded, and in every single case they moved deliberately, not randomly. They were being removed. But the camera never showed a person. There was no shadow, no hand, no figure, just the ornaments moving by themselves, falling to the floor one by one. "Jesus," Marcus whispered. "Becca, what the hell?" I didn't have an answer. We rewound it and watched again, looking for tricks of light or shadows or anything that could explain it. There was nothing. Just ornaments, moving of their own accord, falling in a slow, deliberate pattern. "You can't go back there," Marcus said immediately. "I have to get my things." "No. We call someone. We figure this out. But you don't go back there alone." We called a priest that afternoon. Not because I believed in demons or possession. I didn't, not really. But because I was out of options. The priest came to the house with Marcus and me. He walked through it slowly, quietly, occasionally sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. He didn't find anything. He didn't sense anything. "Old houses have histories," he told me gently. "Sometimes they carry energies, residue from people who lived here before. It doesn't mean anything evil is happening. It just means the house has memory." "Ornaments don't fall off trees because of house memory," I said. "No," he admitted. "They don't. I hired a locksmith to change all the locks, even though I knew it wouldn't help. I had the house inspected for intruders, for hidden crawl spaces, for anything that could explain how someone was getting in and out. The inspector found nothing. For 3 days, I didn't go back to the house. I stayed with Marcus, sleeping on his couch, jumping at every sound. On the 4th day, I forced myself to return during daylight hours. I packed a suitcase with my most important belongings, clothes, documents, photographs. I was going to list the house for sale, but when I walked into the living room, I stopped. All of the fallen ornaments had been carefully placed on the couch, arranged in a line. 12 ornaments, all the ones that had fallen or been taken from the tree. They weren't damaged, they were just arranged, like a message, like a collection. I grabbed the ornaments, shoved them in a box, and left the house. I didn't look back. The house sold 6 months later to a young couple. They seemed nice. They seemed happy to move in. I didn't tell them about the ornaments. I didn't tell them about the nights I'd heard tapping in the walls, or the feeling of a presence in the darkness, or the way the ornaments had moved without being touched. What could I tell them? That my house was haunted by something that collected Christmas ornaments? That it had a taste in decorations? I kept one of the ornaments, the pale blue teardrop that had first fallen. I kept it unwrapped in a drawer for years, unable to throw it away, unable to hang it on another tree. Eventually, I threw it out. But even now, 25 years later, I still remember the feel of it in my hands. Glass and metal, so light, so fragile. And yet, it had been the start of something I still don't understand. Sometimes in December, when I'm decorating my current house, a newer place with no history, no memories, I think about those ornaments. I think about the way they moved on that camera, the way they were arranged on the couch like trophies or offerings. And I think about what it wanted, what intelligence, what presence, what force was in that house, carefully, deliberately, collecting those small glass and wooden and ceramic pieces of my memories. I've never gone back to Asheville. I've never looked up what happened to that house, whether the couple who bought it experienced anything strange. I've never tried to research the history of the property, to find out if anyone died there, if something tragic occurred in those walls. Because the truth is, I don't want to know. I want to believe it was just an old house, just settling in wind and hooks that weren't quite secure enough. I want to believe that ornaments can fall and arrange themselves through the simple physics of a house at rest. But I know what I saw on that tape. I know what I felt in the darkness. And every time I hang an ornament on my tree now, I do it with a kind of prayer. Please don't let anything want to collect these. Please let them stay where I put them. Please let me keep my memories to myself. Story 3. My name is Thomas Whitmore, and I was 42 years old in December 1994 when I decided to string the most elaborate Christmas light display my neighborhood had ever seen. I lived in a suburb outside Denver called Littleton, in a 3-bedroom ranch house I'd owned for 15 years. My wife, Patricia, had died of cancer 2 years earlier. My 2 adult children were living in other states. I was alone in a house that had once been full of noise and life. That Christmas, I decided, would be different. I would fill the silence with light. I started in November, planning the design meticulously. I'd buy thousands of lights, not the old incandescent kind, but the new LED strings that had just started becoming available. I'd create patterns, images, animations. I'd make my house the centerpiece of the neighborhood. People would drive from miles away to see it. I spent $3,000 on lights. I spent another $1,000 on timers and electrical equipment. I spent 6 weeks in October and November climbing ladders, stringing wires, planning circuits and connections. By early December, my house looked like it was on fire with color red, green, white, and blue lights covering every inch of the exterior. I'd created a light show that pulsed and danced in patterns. It was beautiful. It was obsessive. It was the only thing keeping me from thinking about the empty house, the empty rooms, the empty bed. On December 1st, I turned it all on for the first time. The effect was stunning. The entire front and sides of my house lit up in a cascade of color. I'd programmed the timers so that the lights would dance in sequence, creating the illusion of movement. People stopped their cars to watch. Kids pointed from car windows. My neighbors came over to congratulate me, though I noticed a few of them seemed a bit uncomfortable with the intensity of it. "It's beautiful, Tom," my neighbor Linda said carefully. "Really something. Just getting started," I told her. By the second week of December, I'd added more lights. Thousands more. The display had grown so large that the power usage was noticeable. I'd had to upgrade my electrical panel. My electricity bill for that month would end up being triple the normal amount. I didn't care. At night, I'd sit in my living room with the lights off, watching the glow from outside paint shadows across my walls. The colors would shift and change, and I'd imagine Patricia was there with me, seeing it, approving. She had always loved Christmas lights. By December 20th, my display was visible from 3 blocks away. The neighborhood kids called it the Magic House. Groups of people would park on my street to photograph it. Some drove by multiple times a night. I'd become a minor attraction. That's when the letters started arriving. The first one came on December 21st. It was in my mailbox, no postage, just my name written on the envelope in careful, precise handwriting. Inside was a single piece of lined notebook paper. "The lights are beautiful. Can I see them up close?" I assumed it was from a neighborhood kid. I threw it away. The second letter came on December 22nd. Same envelope style, same handwriting. "I've been watching them every night. They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Can I come inside and see them from your house?" This one made me slightly uncomfortable, but I still thought it was probably a teenager playing a prank. I locked my doors, something I didn't usually do in Littleton, where crime was virtually non-existent, and tried not to think about it. The third letter came on December 23rd. "I'm outside right now. I can see the glow from your window. I can see you sitting in the dark, watching the lights. I want to sit with you and watch them. Can I come in, please?" I called the police. An officer came by that afternoon and took the letters. He seemed as confused as I was. "These could be from anyone," he said. "A fan, someone a little socially awkward but harmless. Could also be someone testing boundaries. I'd recommend increased security, lock your doors, maybe invest in motion lights or a camera if you're concerned. But there's not much I can do until someone actually trespasses or threatens you directly." "They said they were outside my house," I said, "watching me. But they didn't try to enter," the officer pointed out. "And they didn't threaten you. I know it feels invasive, but legally, it's a gray area." After he left, I sat in my living room and looked out at my display. The lights pulsed and danced, beautiful and bright. But now they felt different. Now they felt like bait. That night, I turned them off. The absence of the lights was strange. My house looked smaller without them, darker, less alive. I sat in the silence and realized how much I'd been depending on them, on the distraction, on the external validation of people stopping to admire what I'd created. On the morning of December 24th, I found a note taped to my front door. "Why did you turn them off? They were so beautiful. Don't take them away. Please turn them back on. I need to see them. I need to see you." The handwriting was the same, but this one was different. The words were larger, pressed harder into the paper, like they'd been written with intensity. I tore the note down and called the police again. The same officer came back, and this time he took it more seriously. He said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. He suggested I consider staying with family for the holidays, or at least having someone stay with me. "It's probably nothing," he said, "but better safe than sorry." I didn't call my children. I didn't want to alarm them. Instead, I invited my neighbor Linda over. I told her I was feeling lonely for the holidays and asked if she'd like to have dinner. She agreed, seeming pleased that I was reaching out. That evening, as we were eating, I could see out the window to where my dark house stood, unlit and silent. The absence of the lights felt like a loss. "You should turn them back on," Linda said, following my gaze. "They were wonderful. Everyone loved them. Someone's been sending me letters," I said. "About the lights." I showed her the 3 letters and the note from the door. She read them carefully, her expression growing more concerned with each one. "This is creepy," she said finally, "but also, I wonder if it's someone who's just lonely, someone who connected with the lights because they reminded them of something good. That note about needing to see you, it sounds like someone who's really isolated." "That doesn't make it less creepy," I said. "No," she agreed, "but maybe it helps to think of it that way. Maybe instead of being afraid, you could try to, I don't know, reach out." After Linda left, I sat alone in my dark house and thought about that. On Christmas Eve morning, I turned the lights back on. Not all of them, just a section, the front of the house, the most visible part. Just enough to create that gentle glow that people had loved, but not so much that it felt like an obsession anymore. That night, I did something impulsive. I put a handwritten note in my mailbox, the flag up so it was visible from the street. "I don't know who you are, but the lights will be on every night until January 1st. You can watch them from the street. But please don't come to my door. I'm alone too, and I'm scared. Can we just share this from a distance?" I didn't expect a response, but I felt better having written it. For 3 days, nothing happened. The lights glowed, people came by to see them, and I received no more letters. I began to think maybe that was it. Maybe they'd gotten what they needed and moved on. Then, on December 27th, I found a new note. "Thank you for turning them back on. I've been watching from across the street. You're kind. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm not dangerous. I've been alone for a very long time. The lights made me feel less alone, and when I saw you sitting in the dark watching them, I felt like maybe you understood that too. Maybe you were lonely too. I'm going to leave now. I'm going to go somewhere else, but I want you to know that your lights saved me this Christmas. They made me feel like beauty still exists in the world. Thank you." The note was longer, the handwriting more careful, almost delicate, and at the bottom there was a small drawing, a sketch of my house with lights rendered in pencil, actually quite beautiful. I never saw the person who'd written the letters. I never found out who they were or where they'd gone. The police increased patrols for a few more days, then stopped when no other incidents occurred. But I've thought about those letters for 30 years. I've wondered about the person who'd stood across the street, watching my lights, watching me, desperate for connection. I've wondered if they found what they were looking for, if they're still out there, if they ever found someone to share the beauty of Christmas with. I keep the last letter in a drawer. Sometimes I take it out and look at the sketch of my house, the lights rendered in simple pencil strokes. It's the best drawing anyone has ever made of my home. The next Christmas, I didn't put up lights. I couldn't face it, the intensity, the obsession, the knowledge that someone had been watching. But the year after that, I put up a smaller display. Just modest, tasteful lights, enough to bring a little joy to the neighborhood, but not so much that it became a beacon for the lonely or the broken. I never received another letter. My children eventually asked why I'd stopped making such an elaborate display. I told them I just wanted something simpler, more meaningful. I didn't tell them about the letters, about the person who'd stood in the darkness, and felt less alone because of colored lights dancing on a house in the suburbs. But sometimes, when I see a car slow down to admire my modest display, when I see a child, press their face against the window to get a better look. I think about that person. I think about what it means to be so lonely that someone else's joy becomes your own. To be so desperate for connection that you'll write letters to a stranger, watch them from across the street, leave sketches of their home like offerings. And I think about how the horror wasn't really the letters. It wasn't the intrusion or the invasion of privacy. The horror was recognizing myself in those letters. Recognizing that I, too, was so isolated that I'd spent thousands of dollars on lights and elaborate displays, not really for the neighborhood, but because I needed to feel like I mattered. Like my house, my life, my existence was worth seeing. The real horror was understanding that the person who sent those letters and I were the same kind of lonely. That's the Christmas I can't forget, not because someone scared me, but because someone helped me see myself. Story 4. I had planned to spend Christmas with my parents in Sacramento, but my company's year-end project deadline pushed back to December 22nd. By the time my manager finally released us that evening, it was too late to drive 6 hours south. My family understood. They always did. My mom said they'd celebrate on the 26th instead, after I drove down for the long weekend. So there I was, alone in my one-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, with 5 days of Christmas decorations. I'd put up 2 weeks earlier and zero plans beyond ordering Thai food and binge-watching Netflix. The apartment itself was small but comfortable. Ground floor, which I'd thought was a selling point when I signed the lease. Easier to move in, closer to the building. Its front entrance, less stairs to climb after long shifts at the clinic where I work as a respiratory therapist. The living room had tall windows facing the building's courtyard, a narrow hallway leading to my bedroom, and bathroom, a kitchen that was barely functional, and a storage closet I'd never really explored. Thin walls meant I could hear the neighbor's television through the drywall, and the radiator hissed and clanked at random hours. But the rent was reasonable, and it was mine. By December 23rd at 9 p.m., I was settled. My apartment smelled like cinnamon and pine from the small tree in the corner, and I'd wrapped a few last. Minute gifts I'd ordered online, a sweater for my mom, a coffee maker for my dad, books for my brother. The packages had started arriving 3 days earlier. Amazon boxes, Etsy packages, one unmarked brown box with no return address. I assumed it was probably something I'd ordered and forgotten about, or maybe a gift from a coworker. I'd set them all in a pile near the front door, planning to load them into my car in the morning. That first night, everything felt normal. I made pasta, watched an episode of Severance, and went to bed around 11:30. The radiator clanked, the neighbor's dog barked. Standard apartment sounds. I remember thinking how quiet the building seemed. Most of my neighbors had probably left for the holidays. The parking lot outside my window was maybe half empty. The first sign came the next morning. When I opened my front door to grab the packages and take them to my car, I noticed something off. The unmarked brown box, the one with no return address, had been opened. Not torn open like a delivery mishap. Cut open, cleanly, along the top seam with something sharp. Careful, intentional. I stood there in my doorway, holding my apartment key, staring at it. My neighbor's doors were closed. The hallway was empty. The building was quiet enough that I could hear the radiator hissing 3 units down. I brought the box inside and closed the door, locking it. Inside was a Christmas ornament. Expensive looking, maybe hand-blown glass, deep red with gold swirls. Beautiful in an unsettling way. No note, no card, just the ornament, wrapped in white tissue paper that had been carefully folded. I checked my email, my order history, my bank statements. Nothing. I'd never ordered an ornament like this. I showed the box to my mom over FaceTime. She had no idea where it came from either. Probably an Amazon mix-up, she said. Someone ordered it to the wrong address. Maybe it's meant for another Sarah. But that didn't sit right. The box hadn't been damaged in delivery. It had been opened deliberately. I hung the ornament on the tree anyway, waste not, want not, and tried not to think about it. That night, I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard the knock on the door. Not a doorbell ring, an actual knock. Knock, knock, knock. Deliberate, patient. I froze, wooden spoon in hand, water boiling behind me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked my phone. No text, no call. I walked to the peephole, but the angle was bad. I could only see a blurry shadow in the hallway. "Hello?" I called through the door. Nothing. No response. No footsteps walking away. Just silence. I waited 5 minutes, then looked again. The hallway was empty. That night, I barely slept. Every small sound, the radiator, the pipes, a car passing in the street, had me wide awake, listening. My phone sat on my nightstand at full brightness. I told myself I was being paranoid. An ornament delivered to the wrong address, maybe. A neighbor knocking on the wrong door. The building was old, sounds carried strangely. Probably someone at Unit 3C's door, not mine. On December 25th, Christmas Day, I woke up tired. The apartment was cold. The radiator had been hissing all night. I made coffee and sat in my living room, the tiny tree glowing in the corner, and FaceTimed my family as they opened gifts in Sacramento. My brother made jokes. My mom asked if I was eating enough. My dad showed me his new coffee maker. It felt hollow, like I was watching their Christmas through glass. By the time we hung up, my throat felt tight. That afternoon, I needed milk and eggs for the breakfast I was planning. The grocery store was closing early on Christmas Day, and it was already 3 p.m. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my wallet, and locked the door behind me. The parking lot was nearly empty. Most of Portland seemed to be somewhere else, with family, with friends, anywhere but here. The walk to the store took 15 minutes. The streets were quiet, the sky gray. I bought milk, eggs, bread, and browsed the aisles just to walk around. Anything to delay coming back to the apartment. By the time I checked out, it was getting dark. The cashier, a tired-looking woman maybe 10 years older than me, smiled sympathetically. "Alone for Christmas?" she asked. "Just until the 26th, I said. When I got back to the apartment at 5:47 p.m., I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door to my apartment was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just a few inches, enough that I could see the darkness inside. I knew, absolutely knew, that I had locked it. My hands were shaking. I stood in the hallway for what felt like a long time, but was probably 30 seconds. Do I go in? Do I call the police? Do I call my mom? I was holding a grocery bag in each hand, and my mind felt like static. Then I heard it, the sound of the radiator clanking, loud enough to hear from the hallway. The heating system kicking on. That's when I realized in my panic I might have pulled the door shut without checking if the lock caught. Older buildings, older doors. Sometimes they don't latch properly if you're not careful. I told myself that's what happened. The door had drifted open, nothing else. But when I stepped inside and turned on the light, I knew someone had been in my apartment. Nothing was obviously moved. The couch was where I left it. The kitchen was untouched. My bedroom door was closed, just as I'd left it. But there was something wrong with the air. It smelled different. Not bad, exactly. Just not mine. Like someone else's breath had been in the space. I walked through every room, turning on every light, checking the closets, looking under the bed like I was 8 years old. Nothing. No one. The windows were all locked from the inside. The back door was locked. Everything seemed fine. Everything except that my bathroom mirror had a message on it. Written in condensation from the shower steam, like someone had stood under the hot water and then written on the mirror with their finger before it dried. The letters were shaky, childlike, "Merry Christmas, Sarah." I called the police at 6:15 p.m. The dispatch operator's voice was calm, professional. "Has anything been taken?" she asked. I did a quick inventory. My laptop, my tablet, my wallet, all there. Any signs of forced entry? No. The locks were intact. The windows undamaged. "Has someone made threats toward you?" "No, just a message on a bathroom mirror." The operator's tone shifted slightly. I could hear the subtle change, the recognition that this was probably nothing. Probably a neighbor's kid pulling a prank. Probably a waste of time. But they sensed someone anyway. Officer Morrison arrived 40 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a patrol car that sat in the parking lot like a beacon. I showed her the bathroom mirror. The condensation had dried completely. She looked at the counter, the shower, the floor. "Sometimes bathroom mirrors fog up when the heat kicks on," she said. "Could be moisture. Could be someone just messing with you, sure, but..." She shrugged. "Do you have any enemies? Anyone who knows where you live who might do this? I didn't. My ex-boyfriend was in Seattle. My coworkers barely knew my address. My family was 6 hours away. I don't know, I said. She filed a report, advised me to change my locks and call the non-emergency line if anything else happened. By 7:30 p.m., she was gone, and I was alone again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand, every light in the apartment on, and I listened. The radiator, a car passing, the refrigerator humming. Around 2 a.m. I heard a soft sound from inside the walls, scratching, or maybe just the pipes settling. I called my mom. I want to leave, I told her. Right now. Can I come stay with you? Of course, baby. Pack a bag. Drive safe. Call me when you're on the road. I threw clothes into a duffel bag. I didn't unplug the Christmas tree or blow out candles or do any of the things you're supposed to do before leaving a house unattended. I just grabbed my keys and left. My car, a 2019 Honda Civic, was parked 2 spots away from the building's entrance. I loaded my bag, started the engine, and was on Highway 5 heading south by 3 a.m. I made it as far as Salem before I realized I'd forgotten my wallet, my driver's license, my credit cards, everything. I was 40 miles from Portland and completely unable to pay for gas or a hotel or anything. So I turned around and drove back. The apartment building looked different at 5:30 a.m., darker somehow, even though the sky was starting to lighten. I parked in the same spot and went back inside. My door was still locked. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. My scattered lights, the tree, the ornaments, the unopened gifts stacked by the door. I found my wallet on the kitchen counter, right where I'd left it. But there was something next to it, a Polaroid photograph, the old-fashioned kind that nobody really uses anymore. In the photo, I was sleeping, in my bed, in my apartment. The image was slightly blurred, like it had been taken from a distance, maybe from my bedroom doorway. I was lying on my side, facing toward the camera, my face visible but peaceful. The timestamp on the photo read, Deck 24, 11:47 p.m. I didn't remember anyone being in my room. I didn't remember waking up. I called 911 again. This time, when I told them what I'd found, their response was different. They sent 2 officers and then a detective. Detective Ramirez arrived by 8 a.m., and she took the Polaroid into an evidence bag without letting me touch it again. "Has anything else happened?" she asked. I told her about the condensation message, the opened box, the knock on the door, the smell when I came back from the grocery store. "And you don't know who sent you that ornament?" "No, it came addressed to my apartment, but I don't know who sent it." She made notes. "We'll check the building's security camera footage, if there is any. We'll talk to your neighbors. In the meantime, I'd advise you to stay somewhere else, with family, at a hotel, somewhere public, and I want you to report if anything else happens. Anything, okay?" I nodded. I understood what she wasn't saying. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had come into my room while I slept. Someone had taken a photo of me unconscious and left it as proof. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a neighbor kid playing a joke. This was intentional. This was calculated. This was real. I packed a proper bag that time, locked my windows, and drove to Sacramento without stopping. My parents hugged me when I arrived, and I fell apart in their kitchen. The detective called 2 days later. There had been no security camera footage. The building's system had been broken for 3 months, and the landlord hadn't bothered to repair it. The neighbors on either side of me hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. The ornament box had no traceable information. It had been left in the building's package room by an unknown delivery person. The Polaroid camera was a vintage model. No way to trace it, but they were working on it. They would keep investigating. That was 4 months ago. The investigation is still technically open, but Detective Ramirez told me honestly that without more leads, it's stalled. No one's been arrested. No one's been identified. The apartment building is investigating their locks apparently. Someone had been making copies of keys from the building's maintenance office. It's possible that's how someone got in. It's possible there are dozens of keys to my apartment floating around out there, held by people I've never met. I moved, sold some furniture, got a new lease on a second-floor apartment in a different building. I installed a door alarm, motion sensors, a ring camera. I started carrying pepper spray. I'm sleeping better now, most nights, though I still wake sometimes, with my heart racing, convinced I hear footsteps in the hallway. But sometimes I think about that ornament still hanging on my tree back at my parents' house. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't forgotten my wallet. If I'd made it all the way to Sacramento and stayed there, how long would someone have been in my apartment, standing over my bed, watching me sleep? What would the next photo have shown? And I think about the moment right before that first knock on my door, that exact moment when I was in the kitchen, stirring pasta, with no idea that someone else was in my apartment. Walking through my hallway, standing outside my bedroom door, watching me through the crack, taking their time, patient, careful, deliberate, just waiting for the right moment to leave their gift. The police never found out who, but whoever it was, they knew exactly where I lived. They knew I was alone, and they knew that on Christmas Eve, no one would be listening if I screamed. Story 5. My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm 34 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened over Christmas week 2024 in a rental cabin near Lake Tahoe. It's taken me 6 months to write this down, and I still don't know if anyone will believe it, but I need to get it out of my head, so I'm writing it. Maybe that will help. I'd rented the cabin for 2 weeks, December 22nd through January 5th, as an escape. My marriage was ending, not dramatically, not through betrayal or infidelity, but through the slow erosion of two people who'd realized they'd grown into different shapes. Sarah and I had decided that after the holidays we'd separate. She was staying with her sister in the city. I wanted to disappear into the mountains and not think about anything for a while. The cabin was perfect for that. A 3-bedroom A-frame on 5 acres, surrounded by pine forest, 2 miles off the main highway. The listing described it as rustic luxury, which meant exposed wood beams, a stone fireplace, and expensive kitchen and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out at mountains covered in fresh snow. There was cell service, barely, and a landline that worked most of the time. The owner, a woman named Patricia from Sacramento, had left detailed instructions about the heating system, the propane tank, the septic system, and which key went to which door. The first 3 days were exactly what I needed. I read books. I walked in the snow. I made fires. I didn't check my email or my messages. I existed in a kind of peaceful numbness, the kind of quiet that comes from being completely alone in a landscape that doesn't care about your problems. On December 25th, Christmas Day, I woke to find the power out. The snow had come hard overnight. I could see at least 2 feet of fresh accumulation, and the pine branches sagged under the weight. A tree, probably, had come down somewhere on the power line. I checked the generator, turned it on, and got the lights back. The cabin stayed warm. I made coffee, ate eggs, and spent the day reading by the window. It felt appropriate somehow. Christmas alone in a snowstorm. No distractions, no obligations. That evening, around 7 p.m., I noticed something odd. There were footprints in the snow on my front deck. Not fresh footprints. They looked like they'd been there for at least a few hours, already partially covered by the ongoing snow. But they were deliberate. Someone had walked across the deck, stepped down to the ground below, and walked around the side of the cabin toward the back. The prints were large, probably a man's shoe size, and the gait was careful, measured, like someone trying to be quiet. I told myself it was the previous guests. Probably the last renters had done some exploration, or maybe the owner had checked on the property before I arrived. The cabin had been empty for 2 weeks before I rented it, but there was something about those footprints that made my stomach tighten. I locked the doors. All of them. The front door, the back door, the sliding glass doors that opened onto the deck. I checked the windows all locked. I made sure the generator was running smoothly. Then I sat in the living room with a fire going and tried to read, but I couldn't focus. The windows kept drawing my attention. The darkness outside was complete, with the power out earlier and the generator only powering the essential systems. The cabin's exterior lights weren't working. Just blackness and snow, and the occasional sound of wind moving through the pines. Around 10 p.m., I heard the first knock on the door. Not aggressive, not loud. Just 3 quiet knocks on the front door, spaced out, patient. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. I was holding a book, sitting 3 feet from the fireplace, and I absolutely stopped breathing for what felt like a long time. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The porch light wasn't working. The generator hadn't prioritized the exterior lights, so I could only see the darkness and the falling snow. "Who is it?" I called again. Still nothing. No breathing, no footsteps walking away, just silence. I didn't open the door. I went to the windows and looked out, trying to see if there was a car in the driveway, any sign of another person. Nothing. The long gravel drive disappeared into darkness and falling snow. I told myself it was probably someone lost, looking for directions. Maybe their GPS was broken. Maybe they'd knocked, and when I didn't answer, they'd gone back to their car and driven away. It was Christmas. Maybe someone needed help, but I didn't open the door. That night, I slept in the master bedroom with a kitchen knife on the nightstand. I know how that sounds. I also know that something about those footprints and that knock had triggered an instinct in me, not quite fear, but a heightened alertness, a sense that something wasn't right. I woke several times in the night. The radiator clanked. Old plumbing in remote cabins does that. The wind made the pine branches tap against the windows. Around 3 a.m., I heard what sounded like footsteps on the deck outside the bedroom. I got up, looked out the window, saw nothing but snow and darkness. My heart was hammering. I went to the living room, built up the fire again, and sat awake until dawn. December 26th came gray and cold. The snow had stopped, but the power was still out. I called the utility company on the landline and was told it would be another day at least. A tree was down about 3 miles north, affecting 6 properties. They'd get to it when they could. I spent most of the day outside, walking the property, looking for any sign of a visitor. The footprints from the day before were almost completely covered by new snow, but I could see general indentations in the drifts that suggested someone had walked around the cabins. Perimeter, once, maybe twice. Around back near the bedroom windows, the snow looked disturbed, like someone had stood there for a while. That evening around 6 p.m., I made dinner and settled in front of the fire. I had plenty of firewood. The previous owner had left a massive stack covered by a tarp. I had propane for the stove. The cabin was comfortable, even without the full electrical system. I was fine. But around 8 p.m., I heard the knocking again. This time it was on the back door, the sliding glass door that opened onto the rear deck. Same pattern. 3 knocks, spaced out, patient. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed the knife from the kitchen and moved toward the sliding door, staying to the side so I wouldn't be visible through the glass. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. I looked through the glass into the darkness. Nothing. No shape, no movement, no indication that anyone was standing on that deck. "I'm calling the police," I yelled, which was a stupid thing to say because I wasn't actually calling the police. I was standing in my rented cabin in the middle of nowhere, holding a kitchen knife, yelling at the dark. The knocking stopped, but I heard something else, the sound of footsteps crunching on the snow, walking away from the door toward the side of the cabin. I locked the sliding door twice, checked it again, made sure it was secure. Then I went to the landline and called the sheriff's office. When someone picked up, I told them about the visitor, the footprints, the knocking. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical. "Sir, the property is pretty remote, correct?" "Yes, about 2 miles off the main road." "It's not unusual for people to get lost out there, especially after a heavy snow. Sometimes they'll knock on doors looking for help or directions." "Did the person at the door seem threatening?" "I don't know. I didn't open the door." "And you saw no vehicle, no sign of a car?" "No." "Okay. We'll send someone out to do a welfare check on the property. It'll take about 30 minutes. We're a small department and we're busy tonight. Stay inside, keep the doors locked, and we'll contact you when the officer is en route." 40 minutes later, the sheriff's deputy arrived. Her name was Hernandez. She was maybe in her 50s, and she was professional, but clearly skeptical. She looked at the footprints, most of which were now covered by more snow, walked the perimeter of the cabin with a flashlight, checked the doors and windows, and found nothing. "Could be a local, could be someone who got lost," she said. "The cabin owner called in a while back and mentioned some visitors poking around the properties out here. Usually they're harmless, just curious looking at the high-end cabins, but it's better to be safe. I'd recommend staying in a hotel in town if this happens again." After she left, I felt better for about 2 hours. Then, around midnight, I heard the knocking again. This time, it was on the master bedroom window. Not polite. Not 3 patient knocks. Rapid, aggressive, like someone was trying to get my attention. Knock, 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 knock. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the knife. I didn't turn on the light. The generator had the bedroom lights working now, and I didn't want to silhouette myself against the window. I moved to the side and looked out. Nothing, just snow and darkness. But then I saw it, a shadow moving away from the window, walking toward the back of the cabin. Human-shaped, male probably, based on the size and gait. Moving deliberately, like he knew the property. I called the sheriff again. This time I was clearer, more urgent. Deputy Hernandez said she'd come back out and she'd bring another unit. They arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing, and they took this more seriously. They did a full sweep of the property with flashlights, checked the woods, behind the cabin, looked for any sign of a vehicle parked nearby. They found fresh footprints in the snow near the bedroom window, clearer than the others because the snow had stopped and these were recent. How many times? Hernandez asked me, her tone different now. The knocking? 4 times. The footprints? I don't know. At least 3 different locations around the cabin. The second deputy, a younger guy named Thompson, came back inside and said, "There's a vehicle about a quarter mile down the road, parked in a turnout. We're running the plates now." My stomach dropped. Someone had parked deliberately, away from the main entrance, hidden. Someone had walked through the snow to my cabin and knocked on the doors and windows multiple times. Someone who knew I was inside. The deputies went to the vehicle. It was a gray 2016 Honda Civic, registered to a man named Robert Finch from Reno. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants. When the deputies checked the surrounding area, there was no sign of Finch himself. He was gone. He probably saw our lights and took off into the woods, Thompson said. "We'll do a search in the morning, but it's not safe to go out there in the dark." "Should I go to town?" I asked. "Stay at a hotel?" Hernandez looked at me seriously. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Pack a bag. We'll wait while you do. You shouldn't stay here." I packed in 15 minutes. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I left the fire burning. I didn't care about the firewood. Hernandez followed me in her patrol car to a hotel in South Lake Tahoe. I checked in, locked the door, put a chair against it, and sat on the bed shaking. The next morning I called the cabin owner. Patricia from Sacramento was shocked and apologetic. She confirmed that no one named Robert Finch should have been anywhere near her property. She said she'd contact him. Apparently, he'd rented the cabin 2 years ago and had left a guest review about how beautiful the location was. Maybe he'd come back to the area, seen a rental listing, and decided to check it out. Or maybe something else entirely. The police did a search of the property and the surrounding woods. They never found Robert Finch. His car was towed, but he disappeared into the forest, or maybe hiked out to the main road and caught a ride from someone. The sheriff's report says, no evidence of immediate threat, possible trespassing, unable to locate suspect. That was 6 months ago. The case is technically still open, but I know the sheriff isn't actively investigating anymore. I've thought about Robert Finch constantly. I've Googled his name dozens of times. He's still listed in the Reno phone directory, but when I've called, no one answers. I've considered hiring a private investigator, but to find out what? That he was at my cabin that night? The police already know that. What would I do with the answer? What I think about most is the question that won't leave me alone. What would have happened if I'd opened the door? Christmas Eve, 2 people are inside. The door opens. A stranger from Reno is standing on the porch. Maybe he wants help. Maybe he's lost. Maybe he's lonely and saw lights and decided to see if anyone was home. Maybe he wanted something else entirely. I'll never know because I didn't open the door. I also think about the next cabin over, the one about a mile away. The listing showed it was empty during that week. What if I'd been staying anywhere else? What if I'd left? I'm remarried now, to someone I met in a grief counseling group actually, which is its own kind of story. We bought a house in the suburbs, no remote cabins, no long dark roads, no footprints in the snow, but sometimes I'll be asleep and I'll jerk awake with my heart racing, thinking I hear knocking. And I lie there in the dark, listening, and I think about Robert Finch, and I wonder if he's somewhere out there, thinking about that cabin, thinking about the person who locked him out, wondering if he'll ever get another chance. Story 6. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm 31 years old. I work as an event planner for a boutique hotel chain in Portland, Oregon. What happened to me occurred on December 19th, 2024, just 3 days before Christmas. It's been exactly 1 week since then, and I'm still trying to understand what happened and why I'm the only person who seems to think it was wrong. The Riverside Hotel is a 142-room property built in 1923, renovated in 2015, located in downtown Portland overlooking the Willamette River. It's beautiful. Art Deco bones, restored original features, modern luxury amenities. The kind of hotel that charges $400 a night and gets it. I'd worked there for 3 years, coordinating weddings, corporate events, holiday parties. I knew every inch of the building, every staff member, every system. That December, we were in the middle of our busiest season. The hotel was nearly full every night. Holiday parties, Christmas celebrations, out-of-town visitors. My job was to make sure every event ran smoothly, every guest was satisfied, every detail was perfect. By December 19th, I was exhausted. I'd been working 12-hour days for 2 weeks straight. The hotel manager, David Chen, had told me to take December 20th off, a Friday, to recover before the final pre-Christmas rush over the weekend. But on December 19th, everything changed. I was doing a final walkthrough of the hotel before my shift ended at 6 p.m. It was routine, checking the ballrooms, the lounge, the restaurant, making sure everything was clean, ready for the evening events. The hotel was busy. The lobby had that frenetic holiday energy. Guests checking in, families greeting each other, valets moving cars, the smell of pine garland and cinnamon. I was in the back office, doing paperwork, when our head of security, Martin, knocked on the door. Martin is a former police officer, meticulous, professional, probably in his late 50s. He looked concerned. "Jennifer, do you have a minute?" I followed him to the security office, a small room filled with monitors showing feeds from every public area of the hotel. Martin closed the door and pulled up a specific camera feed, the hallway on the 4th floor. "We've been noticing something unusual," he said. "This guest, in room 412, he checked in on December 17th, 2 nights, he said, but he's been acting strange. The housekeeping staff mentioned it. He asked them not to enter his room. He's been in the hallway at odd hours. He's been taking photos." I watched the monitor. A man, maybe in his 40s, thin, wearing a gray hoodie, walked past room 412 and then stopped. He pulled out his phone and took a photo of the door to room 413, the room next to his. "He's been doing this for 2 days, Martin said, taking photos of the other rooms on that floor. This morning, he was in the 3rd floor hallway doing the same thing. I checked his reservation. His name is David Marsh. He paid cash, no credit card on file. I ran his name, nothing comes up. No criminal record I can find, but something feels off." I watched the monitor, uncomfortable. "Have you asked him about it?" "Not directly. I don't want to escalate if it's nothing, but I wanted to give you a heads up. He paid for another night. Checked out is supposed to be tomorrow, December 20th. I've asked the front desk to keep an eye on him. If anything else happens, we'll ask him to leave." I thanked Martin and went back to work, but that image stuck with me. A man in a gray hoodie, photographing other people's rooms. It felt deliberate, predatory. My shift ended at 6 p.m. I changed out of my work clothes in the employee locker room and was heading to my car when I decided to grab a coffee from the lobby cafe. I was too tired to drive home without caffeine. I was standing in line, waiting to order when I saw him. Gray hoodie, thin face, the man from the security footage. And he was sitting in the lobby seating area, a chair facing the elevator bank. He had his phone out, and he was photographing people, not subtly, deliberately. He'd point his camera at someone, take a photo, then go back to looking at his phone like nothing had happened. I watched him do it 3 times to different guests. I called Martin immediately. "The guy in 412 is in the lobby right now, photographing guests." Martin appeared within 2 minutes along with another security guard. They approached David Marsh, polite but firm. I was too far away to hear the conversation, but I saw Marsh stand up, say something defensive, and then agree to go with them. They guided him toward the elevators, presumably to escort him to his room. I forgot about my coffee and went home. The whole interaction had made my skin crawl. There was something deeply wrong about the way he was photographing people. Not candid, not artistic, but targeting. Hunting. I should have reported it to the police. In hindsight, I absolutely should have. But I told myself that Martin and David had handled it, that the man would be dealt with, that my job was done. I went home, made dinner, and tried to relax on my night off. The next morning, December 20th, my day off, I woke up to a call from David Chen, my hotel manager. "Jennifer, we have a situation. Can you come in?" I was there within 45 minutes. In the manager's office, I found David, Martin, and a woman I didn't recognize. The woman introduced herself as Detective Sarah Kim from the Portland Police Department. "Jennifer," David said, "there's been an incident with the guest in room 412. We need to ask you some questions about what you saw yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" A guest reported that someone had been in her room, room 413, the room next to David Marsh's. She came back from dinner last night, around 11 p.m., and found her door unlocked. She knows she locked it. Nothing was taken, but things in her room had been moved. Her suitcase was open. Her underwear drawer was disturbed. I felt my face go cold. He was photographing that room yesterday. The security footage shows him taking photos of room 413. Detective Kim leaned forward. "He was photographing the room. Do you remember what time?" "Around 4:30 p.m., I think. Maybe 4:45. "And you reported this to security?" "Not directly. I told Martin I saw him in the lobby photographing guests, and Martin asked him to stop." Detective Kim exchanged a look with Martin. "We went to room 412 this morning when Mr. Marsh didn't respond to our checkout reminder. The room was empty. He checked out sometime after midnight. The front desk clerk says she didn't see him leave. But when housekeeping went in this morning, the room was abandoned. His belongings were gone." My hands were shaking. "Did you find anything in the room?" "Not yet. We've secured it as a potential crime scene. We're getting a warrant to search it more thoroughly. But I need you to tell me everything you saw. The security footage, what Martin told you, what you observed in the lobby." I spent the next hour giving my statement to Detective Kim. I explained what Martin had shown me, what I'd witnessed in the lobby, the targeting way he was photographing people. By the time we finished, I was certain of what had happened. David Marsh had used the photos to identify a specific guest, gained access to her room, and violated her privacy. The question was why and what he'd intended to do. The guest in room 413, her name was Catherine, a woman in her mid-40s staying alone for a business conference, was offered a refund, and was moved to a different room in a different part of the hotel. She was shaken but not traumatized. "Nothing was stolen," she kept saying. "I locked my door. I know I locked my door, but he was in there. I can feel it." Over the next 3 days, the police looked for David Marsh. His name wasn't his real name. The credit card information he'd used on the booking was fraudulent. The address was fake. There was no David Marsh in any system. He was a ghost, except for his hotel stay and the photos on his phone that he deleted before leaving. Detective Kim contacted me twice more with questions. The security footage showed Marsh had been in the hotel for 2 full days, December 17th and 18th, photographing hallways and guest room doors before he checked into room 412 on the 17th. He'd chosen his location deliberately, close to room 413, and he'd taken photos of at least 7 other guest rooms on 4 different floors. "We're trying to contact everyone who was staying in those rooms during his stay," Detective Kim told me on December 23rd. "So far, no one else has reported anything unusual. We can't find him. No credit cards, no known addresses, no criminal record under any name we can identify. It's like he didn't exist until he checked into your hotel." I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. What would have happened if Catherine hadn't left the room? If she'd been there when he came in? Detective Kim didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I don't know, but we're treating this as an attempted crime. What crime exactly, I can't say, but the intent was there." After that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake replaying the moment I saw him in the lobby, wondering what he would have done if Catherine had been asleep in her bed when he opened her door. Would he have just photographed her? Would he have done something worse? I called in sick for December 24th and 25th. I couldn't face going back to the hotel, even though David Chen assured me that our security protocols had been updated, that we were reviewing all guest check-ins, that this wouldn't happen again. But the truth was, it could happen again. At any hotel, anywhere, a man with a fraudulent identity, taking photos of rooms, waiting for the right moment, the right room, the right guest. On December 26th, I went back to work. Detective Kim called me that same afternoon. They'd identified David Marsh through the hotel's security footage. His face was clear, on multiple cameras, and they'd sent it to the FBI's facial recognition database. They got a hit. He was actually a man named Derek Sinclair, wanted in 3 states for breaking into hotel rooms. In Washington 2 years ago, he'd broken into a room where a woman was sleeping and had sexually assaulted her. She'd woken up during the assault, fought him off, and he'd fled. In Nevada, he'd broken into multiple rooms. No one had been in them, but police found evidence that he'd spent time in each one, photographing items, stealing small things. Derek Sinclair had been on the FBI's radar for 2 years. He was considered dangerous. He was intelligent, methodical, and patient. He tested locations before committing crimes. He photographed everything, and he'd been in my hotel, in our rooms, planning something. The police still haven't caught him. As of 1 week ago, December 26th, he's still missing. There's a warrant for his arrest, but he's disappeared. Could be in Oregon, could have driven to California, or Washington could be using another fake identity and staying in another hotel somewhere, scouting another location, taking photos of another hallway. What haunts me most is the thought that if I hadn't mentioned the lobby incident to Martin, if I hadn't reported what I saw, Catherine might not have checked back into that room. She might have come back from her dinner to find Derek Sinclair waiting for her in the dark. She might have opened that door and been trapped. But I also think about all the other hotels out there, all the other guests, all the other women sleeping in rooms while men like Derek Sinclair walk the hallways with cameras, taking photos, planning, waiting for their moment. I still work at the Riverside Hotel, but something in me has changed. When I see a guest acting strangely, photographing things, loitering in hallways, I report it immediately. I've been trained by the police on what to look for. I've become hyper-vigilant in a way that never leaves. And sometimes, when I'm doing a walkthrough late in the evening and I turn a corner and find someone unexpected, my heart stops. I see a camera or a phone pointing in the wrong direction, and I think, is it him? Did he come back? Because the thing about predators is that they don't give up. They just change locations. They just wait longer. They photograph more rooms, scout more hotels, plan more carefully. And the thing about working in a hotel is that you realize how easy it would be. How many rooms, how many locks, how many vulnerable people, alone, trusting in a system that failed them. Derek Sinclair is still out there. The FBI knows what he looks like, but so far, that hasn't been enough. Every few weeks I check the FBI's wanted list. His face is still there, photocopied in my mind, thin, methodical, patient, waiting for his next opportunity. Just like he was waiting in the hallway of my hotel, camera in hand, trying doors. Story 7. My name is Alexis Martinez. I'm 26 years old, and I almost died because of a Facebook friend request on December 21st, 2024. That's the only way I know how to say it. I didn't almost die in a dramatic way. No car crash, no fall, no sudden illness. I almost died because someone who had been watching me decided it was time to introduce themselves. And by then, they'd already been inside my world for longer than I knew. I work in marketing for a tech startup in San Francisco. My job is creative, my salary is decent, and my life looks perfect on Instagram. Or at least, that's what I built. 2 years ago, I broke up with my long-term boyfriend, and I'd spent the time since rebuilding myself into someone independent, confident, someone who didn't need another person to feel whole. I had a small apartment in the Mission District, a good friend group, a therapist I saw twice a month. I was doing well, or at least, I was doing well enough. My social media presence was part of my personal brand. I posted photos from work events, photos of my food, photos of myself at parties looking happy and confident. I had about 8,000 followers on Instagram, a mix of coworkers, friends, and strangers who'd started following me for reasons I never quite understood. Facebook I used more sparingly. I had maybe 1,200 friends there, mostly people from college and work and extended friend networks. I didn't post much on Facebook anymore. Instagram was where I curated my public image. On December 21st, I was at work, scrolling through Facebook during a lunch break, when I noticed a new friend request. The name was Richard Holbrook. The profile picture was a man, maybe in his early 40s, decent looking, with kind eyes. He had no mutual friends with me, but his profile showed he was from San Francisco, and his employment history listed a tech company I'd heard of. I almost immediately deleted the request without thinking about it. Random men on Facebook request women all the time. It's like digital cold calling. I didn't think anything of it, but 3 hours later, I got another request. Same name, different profile, same photo, but new account. That seemed odd. I screenshotted it and sent it to my friend Maya with a joke about creepy Facebook guys. She laughed and said to ignore it. Then at 4 p.m. I got a direct message from another Richard Holbrook account. This one was newer, just created that day. Hi Alexis, I think we have a lot in common. I'd love to get to know you better. I didn't respond. I reported the account. I blocked the name. I blocked variations of the name. I made my profile more private. But something about it had made me uncomfortable. The persistence, the different accounts, the feeling that someone was deliberately trying to reach me through multiple channels. I mentioned it to my roommate, Dylan, that evening. Dylan is a software engineer, pragmatic, tech-savvy. He looked at the messages and was immediately concerned. This is coordinated, he said. Multiple accounts, same name, persistent contact attempts. This isn't a random thing. This is someone deliberately trying to get your attention. Maybe it's just a weird guy trying to hit on me, I said, but even as I said it, I didn't believe it. There was something methodical about the approach. Let me look into this, Dylan said. He spent an hour digging through the profiles. All 3 accounts had been created on the same day. They shared the same profile photo but different information, different jobs, different locations, different education histories. All of them had either added me or tried to message me within a 4-hour window. Someone is catfishing you, Dylan said. Or worse, someone is running a test. They're trying different approaches to see which one you'll respond to. Why would anyone do that? To build a profile on you, to figure out what works, to get you to let your guard down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the accounts, the messages, the persistence. I went through my privacy settings again, made my location invisible, made my check-ins private, removed my phone number from my profile. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Someone out there had been looking at me closely enough to know my name, find my profile, and attempt to befriend me. Multiple times. The next morning, December 22nd, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but there was something in me that wanted to know. Hello, is this Alexis Martinez? A man's voice, calm, professional. Who is this? I asked immediately. My name is Detective James Carmichael with the San Francisco Police Department. I'm calling about a report we received regarding potential stalking activity on your social media accounts. Do you have a few minutes to talk? My blood went cold. Someone had reported this. Someone official was aware. Yes, I can talk. We've been investigating a series of social media stalking cases in San Francisco over the past 6 months. Different victims, different platforms, but similar patterns. Someone creates multiple fake accounts, attempts contact, and when that fails, they escalate to real-world contact. Is that what's been happening to you? I got 3 Facebook requests yesterday from accounts with similar names, I said, and some direct messages. But that's all. Has anything happened in the real world? Has anyone approached you in person, followed you? I thought about my commute, my walks around the neighborhood. Had I been aware of being followed? I couldn't say. I commuted by BART and Uber. I walked through the Mission District. There were always people around. There could have been someone watching. I don't know, I said. I don't think so? Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take precautions. Vary your routine. Let someone know where you're going. Check your door locks, your apartment for signs of tampering. And I want you to be aware that the social media accounts you've already been contacted by are part of an ongoing investigation. We have reason to believe they're linked to other cases, so for now, don't accept any friend requests from unknown accounts. Don't respond to messages, just block and report. Do you know who it is? I asked. Do you know who's contacting me? We're still investigating. But I'll send an officer by your apartment tomorrow just to make sure everything's secure. In the meantime, stay alert. After I hung up, I called my mom. Then I called my therapist. Then I called my best friend again. Everyone said the same thing. This is serious. Be careful. Don't be alone. That evening, Dylan and I went through my apartment. We checked every lock, every window, every entrance. Nothing was disturbed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there or had been watching from outside, waiting for the right moment. I didn't sleep well. I kept my phone by my bed. I kept checking my social media, looking for any new accounts, any new messages. Around 3 a.m., I got an Instagram DM from an account I'd never seen before. The username was richardholbrook.sf, and the message was simple. I know where you live. Stop blocking me. That's when I called the police again. And this time, they took it seriously. A police officer came to my apartment within 45 minutes. His name was Officer Chen, and he was young but professional. He took down all the information about the accounts, the messages, the escalation. He told me this was a direct threat, and they would be treating it as such. We need to bring in a detective, he said. This matches a pattern we've been tracking. How much do you know about your building's security? Do you have cameras in the hallway? Do you know who has access to the building? I didn't. My apartment was a ground floor unit in an older building with an electronic keypad entry. The landlord was negligent about maintenance. Anyone with the right combination could get in. Anyone could have been walking past my window at night. Detective Carmichael came back that morning with a team. They reviewed my social media accounts, my followers, my check-ins. They looked at my Instagram photos to see what information they revealed. The coffee shop where I worked most mornings, the gym I attended. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the restaurant I went to most Friday nights. You're painting a very clear picture of your life, Carmichael told me, not unkindly. Someone looking at your Instagram would know exactly where to find you and when. I didn't think about it that way, I said. Everyone posts things like that. Not everyone has a stalker photographing them. That's when I understood. This wasn't just someone trying to contact me online. This was someone who had been watching me in person, who had seen me enough times to decide they were interested, who had then researched me online to figure out the best way to make contact, who had created multiple fake accounts to test my responses, and when I hadn't responded, who had escalated to a direct threat and an Instagram DM promising violence. Has anyone looked like they were watching you? Carmichael asked. Anyone you've noticed more than once? Anyone at your gym, your coffee shop, your apartment? I thought back over the past few weeks. Had anyone seemed familiar? Had anyone made eye contact for too long? I couldn't say for certain. There were so many faces every day. So many people in San Francisco. How would I know if one of them had been watching me? I'm going to recommend that you don't go to work for the next week, Carmichael said. I want you to stay in safe locations, either your apartment with the doors locked or with trusted friends. If you need to go somewhere, tell someone where you're going and have them track your location. Don't deviate from routine. Don't go anywhere alone. For the next 4 days, December 22nd through 25th, I was essentially a prisoner in my own life. I stayed in my apartment. I had groceries delivered. I worked from home. I checked my locks obsessively. I had the police number saved in my phone with one-click calling. I didn't go outside. I didn't go to work. I didn't go to my gym. And every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every time I heard a noise in the hallway, my heart raced. On Christmas Eve, at 11 p.m., I got another Instagram message from a new account, Richard Holbrook. The message was, I've been watching you for 6 months. I know you better than anyone. I know you're scared right now. That's okay. I'm patient. I can wait. That message is what made me understand that this person had been tracking me since June, since summer, for 6 months. While I thought I was living my life freely, someone had been watching. Photographing me maybe, noting my patterns, learning my schedule, building a case for why we were meant to know each other. The police traced the IP addresses of the messages. They came from an internet cafe in Oakland, about 30 minutes from my apartment. The cafe didn't have good security camera footage. By the time the police followed up, the cameras hadn't been recording. The trail went cold. Carmichael kept investigating. He had officers drive past my apartment building. He set up a system where I could call and report any suspicious activity immediately. He told me they were looking at other cases, other victims, trying to find a pattern that would lead them to whoever was behind the accounts. "Do you have any exes who might be doing this?" he asked. "No, nothing like this. Anyone at work who's shown an unhealthy interest in you?" "No. Anyone online? Any of your followers who've messaged you aggressively?" I went through my DMs. Hundreds of messages from strangers, some complimentary, some creepy, but nothing that stood out as obviously connected. It's December 27th now. I've been back to work for 2 days. The police are still investigating, but they don't have leads. The accounts have gone quiet. No new messages, no new contact. But the detective told me that doesn't mean anything. It means the person is waiting. It means they've learned that direct contact gets them police attention. So now they're probably just watching again. Probably back to photographing me from a distance. Probably back to noting my routines, my patterns, my vulnerabilities. I've hired a security consultant to review my apartment. I'm moving in January to a building with better security and a doorman. I've deleted most of my Instagram photos and made my account private. I've stopped checking into places. I've started varying my routine obsessively. But I know something that terrifies me more than anything. He's still out there. Somewhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a man who spent 6 months watching me, who decided he wanted to know me, who created fake identities to test how to reach me, who made threats when I didn't respond, and he might still be watching. Because the thing about social media is that it's designed to be watched. We post photographs, we check in at locations, we tag our friends, we create a complete map of our lives for anyone who wants to look. And sometimes someone does look. Someone looks so hard and for so long that they feel like they know you. They feel like they have a right to contact you. They feel like they're entitled to your attention. I look at people on the BART now. I look at faces in coffee shops. I look at the man sitting across from me on the bus. Is it him? Is it the person who spent 6 months studying me? I'll never know. But I know he's out there, and I know he's patient, and I know that somewhere, someone is looking at another girl's Instagram right now, watching her routine, planning her introduction, waiting for the right moment to let her know that she's being seen. That's the real horror. Not that it happened to me, but that it's happening to someone else right now, and probably to someone else tomorrow, and to dozens of other women, other people, unaware that they're being watched through the photographs they voluntarily uploaded to the internet. The digital footprints we leave don't fade. They just accumulate in the eyes of people we never knew existed, until one day they decide to say hello. Story 8. My name is Catherine Kate Sullivan. I'm 29 years old, and I didn't see the danger coming because it wore my brother's face. This happened over Christmas week 2024, and it took me 6 days to understand that the person living in my childhood home was not my brother. That he was someone who had been pretending to be my brother, and that he'd had access to my family, to my parents, to my sister-in-law, to my 2 young nieces for an entire week before anyone realized something was wrong. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, in a 4-bedroom colonial that my parents bought in 1992. My father is a retired accountant, my mother is a retired teacher, and they live a quiet life, book clubs, grandchildren, early dinners. My older brother, Christopher, lives 45 minutes away in New York with his wife, Amanda, and their 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. We're a normal family. We have Thanksgiving together, Christmas together, the occasional birthday party. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated. On December 18th, my parents called me in Boston, where I'd moved 5 years ago for work. I'm a project manager for a consulting firm. I live alone in a 1-bedroom in the Back Bay neighborhood, and I usually drive home to Connecticut for the holidays. We were hoping you'd come Christmas Eve, my mom said. Christopher's whole family is coming. Amanda's making her famous prime rib. We'll do the whole thing. Carols, movies, the girls opening presents in the morning. I'll be there, I promised. On December 23rd, I drove to Connecticut. It took 3 hours, and I got to my parents' house around 6 p.m. The house smelled like it always does at Christmas: cinnamon, pine, and my mother's homemade cookies. The tree was up in the living room, lights glowing, presents piled underneath. My parents were happy to see me. We made dinner, we caught up, we watched a movie. Everything was normal. That night I went to bed in my childhood bedroom, the same twin bed I'd slept in high school, the same walls covered in old photos and book posters. I fell asleep easily, happy to be home. The next morning, Christmas Eve, I woke up and went downstairs to find my brother already there. Christopher was in the kitchen with my mother, drinking coffee. He looked exactly like I remembered. Tall, dark hair, the same facial features as me, the same smile. He was wearing a navy sweater and jeans. He hugged me and said, "Hey Kate, good to see you." But something was off. I couldn't identify it immediately. It wasn't anything obvious. He looked right. He sounded right. He had all of Christopher's mannerisms. But there was something in the way he moved, something about his timing, something about the way he made eye contact that felt slightly incorrect, like someone was controlling him from 1 centimeter behind his eyes. "Where's Amanda and the girls?" I asked. "They're coming in a couple hours," he said. "Amanda had to work this morning. The girls are excited, though. Emma made a drawing for the tree." Everything he said was what Christopher would say. Everything was normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I spent the morning with my parents, trying to dismiss the feeling. Christopher and I hadn't spent much time together in the past few years, maybe twice a year, maybe less. People change. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was being paranoid. But when Christopher's car pulled into the driveway around noon, when Amanda and the girls got out, I saw Amanda's face. She looked confused. She looked like she was searching for something in her husband's expression, like she was looking for recognition, for confirmation that this was who she'd been married to for 12 years. "Christopher," she said, and it was a question. "Hey, babe," he said, and he kissed her. But it looked like an approximation of a kiss, like someone demonstrating what a kiss should be without quite understanding the purpose. Emma, who's 8, ran to him and hugged his legs. Sophie, who's 5, hung back, uncertain. Christopher picked up Emma and spun her around, and she laughed, but there was something forced about it. Like he was following a script of what a father should do. Throughout Christmas Eve, I watched him. I watched the way he interacted with my family, the way he responded to conversation, the way he moved around the house. And the more I watched, the more certain I became this was not my brother. This was someone wearing my brother's body, or someone who looked exactly like my brother, or someone who had learned to be my brother so well that almost no one would notice. But Amanda noticed. I saw her watching him with growing concern. I saw her trying to catch his eye, trying to find something familiar in his expression. I saw her hand him a drink at one point, and I saw him look at the glass like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it before remembering to drink it like a normal person would. "Can I talk to you in the kitchen?" I asked Amanda quietly while Christopher was occupied with the girls and my parents were putting out snacks. She looked relieved to be asked. We went into the kitchen. "Is something wrong with Christopher?" I asked directly. Amanda's face crumpled a little. "I don't know," she said quietly. "He's been off since he picked me and the girls up this morning. He's been acting strange, distant. He keeps asking me questions he should already know the answers to. This morning he asked me how old Emma was. Kate. He knows how old Emma is. He celebrated her birthday 4 months ago." My stomach dropped. "What else?" "He doesn't remember things. When we were driving, he took a wrong turn on a road he drives every single day. When I pointed it out, he corrected course, but he looked confused, like he was accessing a map he'd memorized but didn't really understand. And last night," she stopped, her voice shaking. "Last night, when we were intimate, it was like he didn't know where anything was. It was like the first time we'd ever been together. And he kept watching my face like he was trying to figure out what I was feeling instead of just feeling it." I told her I thought she should talk to my parents. I didn't tell her what I was really thinking, which was someone is pretending to be your husband, and I don't know why. We went back into the living room. My parents and Christopher were putting together a toy the girls had unwrapped early. I watched him assemble it. His hands moved precisely, following the instructions with meticulous attention. A real person would have done this half-automatically from muscle memory, but he treated each step like a puzzle, pausing to reference the instructions multiple times. That night, after we'd eaten dinner and the girls had been put to bed, I convinced my parents to go to bed early. Amanda went upstairs, and I sat alone in the living room with this man who was wearing my brother's face. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He looked at me calmly. "Sure, what's your name?" He paused, just for a moment. "Christopher Sullivan. I'm your brother." "Where were you born?" "Stamford, Connecticut, St. Luke's Hospital, November 14th, 1990. He knew the facts. He had the information. But there was something in his delivery that was rehearsed, like he was reciting from a script. "What's my favorite book?" I asked. He looked thoughtful. "You like crime novels, Gillian Flynn. You mentioned that at Thanksgiving." He was right, but the way he knew it was wrong, like he'd filed the information away as a fact, rather than remembering a conversation with me. "What do you remember about the time I broke my arm in high school?" I asked. He paused for longer this time. "You fell off the balance beam in gym class, sophomore year. We went to the hospital. Mom cried." The facts were correct, but the tone was wrong. He was accessing memories, but they weren't his memories. They were secondhand, learned. I stood up. "I'm going to call the police." "Kate," he said, and the way he said my name, with careful emphasis, like he was practicing pronunciation, terrified me. "I wouldn't do that." "Who are you? Where's my brother?" "Your brother is safe. He's sleeping. He's been sleeping for a week. We gave him something to help him rest. When you all leave tomorrow, he'll wake up and he won't remember any of this, and everything will be fine." I backed toward the stairs. "Did you hurt him? Did you hurt my family?" "No one is hurt," he said, and he stood up. "No one has to be hurt. But we needed a week. We needed to understand how your family lives, what your routines are, what your security is like. Your brother was very helpful with that." "Who's we? What do you want?" "That's not important right now," he said. "What's important is that you go upstairs, you get some rest, and tomorrow you drive back to Boston. You don't call anyone. You don't report anything, because if you do, we'll know. We're very good at knowing things." I ran upstairs. I went to my parents' room and locked the door. I called 911. I told the dispatcher what was happening. I told her that my brother had been replaced by an imposter, that my family was in danger, that there was an intruder in our house. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 state troopers, professional and immediate. They came into the house with flashlights and they found him, the thing wearing Christopher's face, sitting calmly on the living room couch, reading a book. When they approached him, he didn't resist. He stood up slowly and held out his hands. He had an ID, my brother's ID. He had a driver's license, a library card, everything that said he was Christopher Sullivan. "I'm just visiting my family," he said to the officers, confused. "My sister called 911? Why?" My parents came downstairs, Amanda came downstairs, and they all looked at each other, and I could see the doubt in their eyes. This man looked exactly like my brother. He had my brother's ID. He had my brother's memories. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was my brother, and I was having a paranoid episode. But he wasn't. I know he wasn't. The police asked him about his whereabouts, his identity. He answered everything perfectly. When they asked my parents if this was their son, they said yes. When they asked Amanda if this was her husband, she said, hesitantly, yes, because even though everything was wrong, nothing was wrong enough to prove in front of the police that this wasn't who he claimed to be. I was the only one who knew the truth, and I had no way to prove it. The officers took me aside. "Your family says they don't want to press charges. Your sister-in-law is concerned about you. Have you been under a lot of stress?" I tried to explain what I'd noticed, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he didn't know things he should know, but as I said it out loud, it sounded insane. Of course he moved like Christopher. He was Christopher. Of course he knew things about himself. He was himself. The officers left around 2 a.m. They advised me to see a therapist, to consider that stress and family dynamics might be affecting my perception. They were polite about it, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was unstable. My brother, the real Christopher or the imposter, I still don't know, came upstairs and knocked on my door. I didn't open it. "Kate," he said through the door. "I'm sorry if I said something to upset you. I love you. I'm your brother," and I realized he doesn't know what he is. Or he knows exactly what he is, and that's what makes it worse. On Christmas morning, my parents acted like nothing had happened. They opened presents. They made breakfast. Christopher played with Emma and Sophie. Amanda watched him with an expression I couldn't read, fear or confusion or resignation. My father patted Christopher on the shoulder and told him it was good to have him home. My mother hugged him and didn't let go for a long time. I drove back to Boston that afternoon. I called every law enforcement agency I could think of. I called the FBI, the state police, local police. I told them what I'd experienced, and every single time the response was the same. Do you have any proof? Could you describe what was different about him? Were there any physical marks, any injuries, any concrete evidence that he wasn't your brother? I had nothing. I had instinct and observation and a deep certainty that something was profoundly wrong. But in a world where identification is based on biometric data and DNA and memory, how do you prove that someone is not who they claim to be when they have all the evidence of being exactly who they claim to be? On December 26th, I got a call from my mother, Kate. "I think you should know that Christopher and his family have decided to go home a day early. Amanda thought it would be good to get back to their regular routine. They left this morning. I haven't seen or spoken to my brother since that day. I've driven past his house in New York. The house is empty. His job doesn't have any record of him coming in." Amanda's phone number goes to a generic voicemail. The girls' school says they've been withdrawn for the remainder of the year. My parents insist that everything is fine. When I try to bring up what happened, they act confused. "Kate, what are you talking about? Christopher was here for Christmas. It was lovely. I don't know why you keep saying strange things about him." It's like they're forgetting, or like they're being made to forget, or like, in the face of overwhelming evidence that Christopher was Christopher, they've simply decided that my perception must be wrong. I've tried hiring a private investigator. I've tried looking at security footage from my parents' neighborhood. I've tried everything I can think of, but whatever that was, they were good at what they did. There's no evidence that anything was wrong. There's no evidence that my brother was ever replaced, except that my brother is gone. And somewhere there's a woman named Amanda and 2 little girls named Emma and Sophie who are living with someone who isn't their husband and father. And they're probably telling themselves that everything is fine. They're probably getting used to the way he moves, the way he doesn't quite understand. Jokes, the way he seems to be learning how to be human from a distance. And I'm the only person who knows. I've been seeing a therapist since January. She suggests that family stress and unresolved issues with my brother might have contributed to a perceptual distortion. She suggests meditation and boundaries and self-care. But I know what I saw, and I know that my brother is gone. Sometimes I think about going to his house, breaking in, looking for evidence. But I know that if I do, if I push too hard, they'll come for me too. Whoever they are, whatever they want, they're patient. They plan things carefully, they don't leave evidence, and they know where I live. Story 9. My name is David Winters. I'm 38 years old, and I learned the hard way that sometimes the people we invite into our homes are not who they claim to be. This happened over Christmas week 2024 in a house I'd owned in Asheville, North Carolina for 6 years. I should have seen the signs. I should have trusted my instincts. But I didn't, and by the time I realized what was happening, it was almost too late. I'm a real estate developer. I've spent the past 15 years buying properties, renovating them, and either selling them or turning them into rental properties. The Asheville house, a 1920s craftsman-style home with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, was supposed to be one of my passive income streams. I'd renovated it beautifully, furnished it tastefully, and listed it on Airbnb for $250 a night. It was popular with tourists, young couples, families looking for a mountain getaway during the holidays. In November, I'd had 47 bookings for December. The house would be occupied almost every day, different guests rotating in and out. I'd hired a cleaning service to manage the turnover, and I'd installed a smart lock system so guests could check in digitally. I barely had to be involved in the day-to-day operations. The property managed itself. On December 18th, a guest named Michael Chen checked in for a 7-night booking, December 18th through December 25th. Christmas week. The booking was made through Airbnb, paid in full with a credit card. His profile showed he was a 44-year-old business consultant from Atlanta. He had 4 previous Airbnb bookings, all with 5-star reviews. He had a verified ID. Everything checked out. He checked in at 3 p.m. on the 18th using the smart lock code. I didn't meet him. I never meet the guests. I live in Charlotte, about 90 minutes away. My property manager, a woman named Patricia, was supposed to check the house on the 20th for a standard inspection. Everything was routine. On December 19th, I got a call from Patricia. "David, I went to the house to do the walkthrough, but something's wrong. The guest, Michael, he answered the door and he was, I don't know, odd." "Odd how?" I asked. "He was defensive about me being there. He said he'd paid to stay here and didn't want anyone coming through. I tried to explain that it was just a routine inspection, but he wouldn't let me pass the living room. And David, he'd moved things. The furniture was rearranged. He'd taken pictures down off the walls and stacked them in the corner. He said he wanted the space to feel different." Something in my stomach tightened. Did he seem dangerous? Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. There was something off about him, the way he was looking at me. I got uncomfortable and I left. I called Airbnb and reported the incident. I explained that a guest was potentially damaging the property and behaving strangely. The Airbnb support team was sympathetic but unhelpful. "As long as he hasn't caused any documented damage, we can't remove him early," they said. "If he damages the property, you can file a claim after he leaves." So I called Patricia and told her to be careful, but that we'd just monitor the situation. I told her to skip the rest of the inspections during his stay. We'd do a full assessment after he left on the 25th. On December 20th, I got a strange message from someone claiming to be a neighbor. The message came through my Airbnb contact form. "I live next to your rental property on Oak Street. There's a man staying there who's been acting very strangely. He's been taking photographs of the neighborhood at odd hours. He was photographing my house at 2 a.m. last night. I'm concerned. You should know." I called the non-emergency police line and reported it. The dispatchers said they'd drive by the property and do a welfare check. But when I called back the next day to follow up, they said the officer had stopped by. The guest was cooperative, and there was no evidence of criminal activity. He said he was a photographer and was looking for nature shots. The neighborhood at night has good light. There's nothing we can do about it. By December 22nd, I was uncomfortable enough that I decided to drive to Asheville myself. It was a 90-minute drive, and I told Patricia to meet me at the house at 2 p.m. We went together. When Michael answered the door, I understood immediately what Patricia had meant about something being wrong. He was polite, but there was a flatness to his affect that was unsettling. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He welcomed us in, but his body language suggested he would have preferred we didn't come. "Just a routine check," I said, trying to sound casual. "Make sure everything's working properly." "Everything's fine," he said. "I'm very comfortable. I'm thinking of extending my stay, actually. I'd like to stay through New Year's." I exchanged a look with Patricia. "I'm sorry. We already have a booking for the 26th. You'll need to check out as scheduled on the 25th. He nodded, and there was something in his nod that felt like resignation. Like he was adjusting a plan. We did a walkthrough of the house. The living room and kitchen were fine, just rearranged slightly. But when I went upstairs, I found something that made my blood go cold. In the master bedroom, he'd removed the framed photograph of me and my ex-wife that sat on the dresser. He'd replaced it with a photograph that was the same size, in the same frame, but it was a photograph of him. It was a headshot, professional quality, and he was staring directly at the camera with an expression that was almost challenging. "Why is there a photo of you in my house?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked at the photo like he was seeing it for the first time. "Oh, I took that photo myself. I'm a photographer, as I mentioned. I like to document my travels. I hope you don't mind." "I mind," I said. "Please remove it." "Of course," he said, and he took the photo down and placed it in a drawer. But he did it slowly, deliberately, like he was establishing that he had access to every inch of this property, including drawers I didn't even know he'd opened. In the guest bedroom, I found something worse. He'd removed the art, the prints and paintings I'd carefully selected for the room, and replaced them with printouts of photographs. Photographs of the house, different angles, different rooms, different times of day. Some of them looked like they'd been taken from outside the house, shot through windows, capturing the interior from the street. "What are these?" I asked, my voice steady but my hands shaking. Like I said, I'm documenting my travels. I like to photograph the places I stay. It helps me remember them. Patricia had stepped back into the hallway. I could see the fear in her expression. "I'm going to need you to remove all of these photos immediately," I said. "And I'm going to need you to check out tomorrow instead of Christmas Day." "I paid for 7 nights," he said calmly. "I've only used 6. I'm entitled to stay through the 25th. "Not if you're violating the terms of service. You're not allowed to remove property from the house or modify the rooms." "I haven't removed anything of yours," he said. "I've only added things. You can ask for your house back in the same condition it was in." I left Patricia there and called Airbnb from my car. I reported the situation in detail, the strange behavior, the photographs, the modified rooms. I demanded that they remove him immediately from the property. If he refused, they would escalate to law enforcement and advise me to do the same. 2 hours later, Michael Chen checked out. He packed his things, loaded his car, and left. As he was leaving, he made eye contact with me. I was standing in the driveway, and he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. A smile that said, "I've been here. I know this place. I know where you live." Patricia and I did a full inspection of the house. We found photographs in the drawers, under the mattress, hidden behind the headboard of the bed. Dozens of photographs. Every room in the house, every window from the outside. Multiple photos taken at night, shot from the surrounding properties. Photos of me, taken through windows, taken from a distance, taken from angles I couldn't determine. Photos of Patricia, taken without her knowing. Photos of neighbors, photos of the street from every possible vantage point. I called the police again. This time, I had concrete evidence. Detective Maria Hernandez came to the house with a forensic team. They photographed everything. They collected the photos and the framing materials. They dusted for fingerprints, though they explained that it was unlikely to yield results. The guest had paid for his stay through Airbnb, so his presence in the house was technically legal. "Have you contacted Airbnb about this?" Hernandez asked. "Multiple times. They removed him from the property, but I don't know what action they're taking against his account." She made a call. After 20 minutes of conversation, she hung up and looked at me seriously. "Airbnb says that the booking was made with a credit card and ID that we've now confirmed are fraudulent. The name Michael Chen, the identification, the payment method, all of it appears to be fabricated. The real owner of the credit card reported fraudulent charges and has declined to press charges since the amount was relatively small." "So who is he? Who is the person in my house?" "We don't know yet. We're running the photographs through facial recognition. We're checking with other Airbnb hosts in the region to see if anyone else has reported similar behavior. But without a confirmed identity, our options are limited." Over the next week, as I waited for the police investigation to develop, I obsessively checked the photographs we'd confiscated. The way he'd documented the house was methodical and comprehensive. Every window, every door, every lock, multiple shots of my alarm system, multiple shots of the smart lock, photographs showing the various entry points and how they could be accessed. It wasn't the work of an amateur. It was surveillance, reconnaissance. This wasn't a random person who'd rented my house. This was someone who deliberately booked my property for a specific purpose, to map it, to understand its vulnerabilities, to plan something. Detective Hernandez told me that they'd found 2 other Asheville properties where the same thing had happened. Another Airbnb, another vacation rental, same pattern, fraudulent booking, photographs of the house, strange behavior, early checkout before he could be confronted. Whoever this person was, he was doing this methodically across multiple properties. "Is he planning to burglarize them?" I asked. "Possibly," Hernandez said. "Or something else. We don't know his endgame yet, but the pattern suggests he's identifying properties that have security vulnerabilities. Smart locks he could potentially bypass, windows that don't have adequate locks, neighborhoods where a break-in might not be immediately noticed. It's been 4 weeks since Michael Chen checked out of my house. The police investigation is ongoing, but they haven't identified him. Facial recognition hasn't yielded a match. Credit card fraud tracking has gone cold. The payment method was a prepaid card purchased with cash. I've since installed a traditional deadbolt on the house, something that can't be bypassed with a code. I've added cameras. I've had the locks changed. I've temporarily taken the house off Airbnb. I'm not sure when or if I'll list it again, but I think about the photographs constantly. I think about the way he documented everything. I think about what he was planning. I think about how close he might have come to implementing whatever plan he'd mapped out in those rooms. And I think about the fact that there are dozens of vacation rental properties in every city. Airbnb hosts like me who rent to strangers, guests who book properties using fraudulent identities. People who could be spending their week documenting your home, your security, system, your vulnerabilities, while you sleep in a hotel 90 minutes away. The person who photographed my house has never been caught. He could be photographing another house right now, another Airbnb, another vacation rental, another property whose owner has no idea that a stranger is mapping their home, taking pictures of their windows, their doors, their locks. He could be planning something. He could be waiting. He could be deciding which house, which window, which vulnerability is the right one for whatever he's planning to do. And if you rent out a vacation property, or if you've ever checked into an Airbnb, you have to consider, is the person in that room right now photographing your space? Is someone currently documenting your home for a purpose you can't imagine? Because I invited him in. I uploaded photographs of my house to Airbnb. I made it easy for him to find me, to access my property, to understand how to get inside. And the scariest part is I'll probably never know what he was planning. I'll just have to live with the knowledge that someone with a camera and a fraudulent identity spent 7 days documenting every inch of my home. And that he's still out there, probably photographing someone else's house right now, waiting for something. Story 10. My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm 34 years old, and I trusted the wrong person because he was wearing a volunteer badge at a children's hospital. This happened over Christmas week 2024 at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital in Miami, Florida, where I work as a pediatric social worker. For 3 weeks, we all trusted him. And by the time we realized what he was, he'd already gotten closer to vulnerable children than any of us should have allowed. I've worked at St. Catherine's for 7 years. It's a 200-bed pediatric hospital serving low-income and underinsured children in the Miami area. We have oncology, cardiac care, trauma, infectious disease, and a wide range of other specialties. The children we treat are some of the most vulnerable in the community. Many of them have parents who are working multiple jobs, who don't speak English, who are struggling with poverty and systemic barriers. My job as a social worker is to help navigate those barriers, connect families with resources, and make sure that, while the children are being treated medically, they're also being supported emotionally and psychologically. Around Thanksgiving, our volunteer coordinator, Patricia, approached me about a new volunteer. His name was Daniel Reeves, and he'd been vetted and background checked by our hospital. He had a bachelor's degree in child psychology, a clean criminal record, and stellar references from his previous volunteer work at another children's hospital in Georgia. To spend the Christmas season volunteering with pediatric patients, reading to them, playing games, helping to make the holidays special for kids who were spending Christmas in a hospital bed. We were short-staffed during the holidays. Everyone wanted time off to be with family. Daniel seemed like an answer to a problem. Patricia ran him through the standard background check, which he passed, and he was cleared to start volunteering the week of December 2nd. I first met Daniel in person on December 3rd. He was in his mid-40s, professional looking, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He was wearing the volunteer badge that our hospital issues. It identified him as Daniel Reeves, volunteer, and gave him access to certain parts of the hospital. He was already in the pediatric ward, reading to a group of children in the common area. The kids seemed comfortable with him. He seemed natural with them. Daniel is great, Patricia told me. The kids love him. He's been here every day this week. He volunteers in the morning, helps with activities, reads, plays games. The parents appreciate it too. One mom told me he's been the highlight of her son's hospital stay. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel became a fixture in the pediatric ward. He had a routine. He'd arrive at 9 a.m., volunteer until noon, and then leave. He always wore his volunteer badge. He always signed in and out at the front desk. He followed all the protocols. There was nothing obviously wrong with him. But there was something. It was subtle. It was the kind of thing that, if you noticed it, you'd second-guess yourself. But I'm trained to notice things. I work with vulnerable populations, and I've learned to recognize predatory behavior. And there was something about the way Daniel interacted with certain children that made me uncomfortable. He gravitated toward the children who were alone, whose parents weren't at the hospital as much, whose visits were infrequent. There was a boy named Marcus, age 8, whose mother was working 2 jobs and could only visit on weekends. There was a girl named Sophia, age 10, whose parents had custody issues and whose visits were sometimes weeks apart. There was a teenager named Jordan, age 15, who was transgender and had been abandoned by his family after coming out. Daniel spent disproportionate time with these 3 children. On December 18th, I was doing a rounds check and I found Daniel in Marcus's room, alone with the child. The door was closed. I knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Hi, Daniel. Just checking on everyone." Daniel smiled. "Marcus and I are just playing a game. He's teaching me chess." "Wanted." Marcus nodded, but there was something in his expression, a nervousness, a wariness, that didn't sit right with me. "That's great," I said. "Marcus, I need to talk to you for a minute." "Daniel, would you mind taking a break?" After Daniel left, I asked Marcus gently, "Has Daniel done anything that made you uncomfortable?" Marcus shook his head immediately. "No, he's nice. He talks to me about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "School, my mom, video games. He's trying to help me feel better about being in the hospital." That was the benign interpretation. But I decided to monitor the situation more closely. That same afternoon, I was going through our volunteer log, the sign-in sheet where all volunteers record their arrival and departure times, and I noticed something odd. Daniel's times didn't match the times that nursing staff reported seeing him. According to the sign-in sheet, he'd left the hospital at 12:30 p.m. on December 16th. But a nurse mentioned to me that she'd seen him in the east hallway near the patient rooms at 2:45 p.m. that same day. I checked the following days. On December 17th, the sign-in sheet said he'd left at 12:15 p.m., but a respiratory therapist mentioned seeing him outside Sophia's room at 1:30 p.m. On December 18th, the discrepancy was even bigger. The sign-in sheet said noon. But multiple staff members saw him in the pediatric ward at 1:45 p.m. He was staying longer than he was documenting. He was in parts of the hospital where he shouldn't be, and he wasn't logging his presence. I reported this to Patricia and to our security director, a man named Tom Reynolds. Tom took it seriously. He said he'd checked the security camera footage and pulled Daniel's full timeline for the past 2 weeks. 3 hours later, Tom called me into his office. His expression was grim. "You were right to be concerned," he said. "Daniel's been falsifying his volunteer log, but it's worse than that. The camera footage shows him doing several things he shouldn't be doing." He played the footage for me. It showed Daniel entering patient rooms when parents weren't present. It showed him closing doors. It showed him spending time with children one-on-one in private rooms. It showed him in a supply closet that's off-limits to volunteers. And most disturbing, it showed him photographing children, photographs that appeared to be taken without consent, of children in hospital gowns, in vulnerable positions. "Oh my God," I said. "Why wasn't he stopped?" "Because no one was watching closely enough," Tom said. His initial background check passed. He had the right credentials, he had references, and once he was in the system, once he had a badge, staff members assumed he'd been thoroughly vetted. They saw the badge and trusted it. We called the police immediately. We told Daniel not to come back to the hospital. When Detective Mark Chin arrived, we provided him with everything: the security, footage, the sign-in logs, the photographs of children that Daniel had taken. "Has he had contact with the children outside the hospital?" Chen asked. "We don't know," Tom said, "but we should assume he may have. We need to contact the families." The next 24 hours were chaos. We contacted the families of vulnerable children, children whose information Daniel had accessed, children he'd spent time with, children he'd photographed. We told them about the security footage. We told them that we were investigating inappropriate behavior by a volunteer. We told them they should monitor their children closely and report any contact Daniel attempted to make outside the hospital. Marcus's mother was devastated. Sophia's father was furious. Jordan's foster parents were devastated. The child had finally found a safe place at the hospital, and now he was frightened that it had been compromised. The police investigation was swift. Detective Chen had a warrant to search Daniel's apartment within hours. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Daniel had been collecting photographs of children, hundreds of photographs, some from the hospital, some taken in public, parks, playgrounds, schools, swimming pools, some that appeared to be obtained through social media. He had detailed notes on specific children, including the vulnerable ones he'd targeted at our hospital. He had their names, their room numbers, their medical conditions, their family situations. He had maps. He had hand-drawn maps of the hospital showing the locations of patient rooms. He had notes about which rooms could be accessed with which level of credentials. He had documented the staff schedules, the times when certain areas were less supervised. This wasn't impulsive, Detective Chen told me. This was planned. He was mapping out access to vulnerable children. He was documenting them. He was building a database. We don't know what his ultimate intention was, but based on what we found, it was likely predatory in nature. Daniel was arrested and charged with attempted child endangerment, illegal photography of minors, and several other felonies. His bail was set high, and he's currently awaiting trial. But the damage had been done. The families were traumatized. The children were confused and frightened. The staff at St. Catherine's felt betrayed. We'd let a predator access our most vulnerable patients. And the questions remained. How far would he have gone if we hadn't noticed? What were his intentions? What did he plan to do with the photographs and the information he'd gathered? The hospital launched a full review of our volunteer vetting process. We discovered that Daniel's references from the hospital in Georgia were fabricated. The hospital didn't exist. His previous volunteer work had never happened. His credentials were real. His degree was real. His professional licenses were legitimate, but everything about his history was false. He'd created an elaborate persona specifically designed to infiltrate our hospital and access vulnerable children. Patricia, who had hired him, resigned within a week. She couldn't handle the guilt. Tom and I worked together on new protocols, stricter background checks, unannounced verification of volunteer credentials, mandatory staff training on recognizing predatory behavior, limitations on one-on-one volunteer interactions with children. But I still think about those 3 weeks. I think about how close Daniel got to children I'm supposed to protect. I think about the photographs he took. I think about the maps he made. I think about the family situations he documented, the absent parents, the vulnerable children, the children with no one advocating for them. And I think about what he was planning. The case is still in the courts. Daniel's lawyers filed motions to exclude evidence, to suppress the search of his apartment, to question the hospital's authorization to involve police. Every motion has been denied so far, but the trial won't happen until next year. What scares me most is how easy it was, how simple it is to get a badge, to earn trust, to exploit a system designed to help vulnerable people. Daniel walked into a children's hospital with the right paperwork, the right credentials, the right smile, and no one questioned him deeply enough. By the time we realized what was happening, he'd already documented dozens of children, mapped the hospital, and created a database of potential targets. And he's not the only one doing this. After Daniel's arrest, police told us they'd found evidence that he'd done similar things at other hospitals. They're investigating whether he's connected to a larger network of people targeting vulnerable children in medical settings. I still work at St. Catherine's. I still help vulnerable children navigate the medical system, but I'm more cautious now. I'm more suspicious. I notice the small things, the volunteer who closes doors a little too often, the staff member who gravitates towards certain patients, the way someone looks at a child. Because Daniel taught me something I should have known already. Predators don't announce themselves. They infiltrate systems that are designed to be open and welcoming. They exploit trust, and sometimes the people with the biggest smiles and the best credentials are the ones you need to watch most carefully. That's the real horror of what happened at St. Catherine's. Not that Daniel was a predator, but that it was so easy for him to become one. That the systems we have in place, background checks, credentials, volunteer badges, are more theater than protection. That he could walk through our doors, spend weeks photographing and documenting vulnerable children, and no one would have stopped him if we hadn't happened to notice the discrepancies in the volunteer log. And somewhere right now, another predator is probably doing the same thing. At another hospital, at another school, at another organization designed to serve vulnerable children. And the system will probably let him in.